Before we get started with today's show, I would like to thank a few awesome people. Some personal heroes of mine like Chris Nelson, the Top 3 podcast crew, Zulgeek, Colby Moyer, Eric Guess, Rick Firestone, Jill, Kieran, ZNA, Mikey Tabletop, Cupcake, Kyle, new patron Christian S, and many more have all gone to patreon.com/realdavejackson to support the show. I appreciate all of them very much, and you, listener, can be just like them. Just a few bucks a month gets you some bonus content, voting on episode topics, and much more, including, as always, my undying love and respect. On to the show. Hey everybody, my name is Dave Jackson and you're listening to Tales from the Backlog, a video games review podcast where each week I'm joined by a guest to talk about a game we've played. My guest today is a friend of the show, panelist on Cane and Rinse and co-host of the Character Issues podcast and professional shuttle runner, Brian Edwards. Welcome back to the show.
I'm very happy to be back and thrilled to be back talking about this game, and thank you once again for the invitation.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about Nier Replicant today, but before we get into that, for listeners, Brian was a guest earlier on the show. Last year, we talked about Before Your Eyes, which is still, a year after we did that episode, still one of my favorite games to think about and, reminisce on, despite the subject matter there. So that's an episode everyone should go check out. I love that conversation. Brian is, like I said, one of the members of the Cane and Rinse team. And since that other episode that we did, you started your own podcast called Character Issues. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you to tell everybody what's going on those shows.
Yeah, so Phil, thanks again for giving me the opportunity. Cane and Rinse is a long-running video game podcast based out of the UK that I very luckily and haplessly forced my way into about 3 years ago, and they haven't kicked me off yet. So where we do essentially deep dives into games, they record 50 episodes a year, and I'm fortunate to be featured on a number of them, and that's a really good time. And then through the course of that, I met a couple of people through that podcast that we started our own podcast last year, and it kind of took a little hiatus, and we reformed, and we're now back on a regular schedule called Character Issues, which is essentially we're building a running list of the greatest to worst video game characters of all time.
Yes, using the most scientific process possible, right?
Always, we're dedicated to the science.
Yes.
So what I would say to fans of this show, and again, a show that I myself am a fan of, Tales from the Backlog, is
thank you.
Cane and Rinse is similar to. If you're going to equate in my world, Cane and Rinse and Character Issues, the question on the SAT test for those Americans would be, Cane and Rinse is to Character Issues what Tales from the Backlog is to the Top 3 podcasts. In which case, on Cane and Rinse was a more analytical look at the history of the game that we're covering, and on Character Issues, it's really just three of us getting to be our dumb, goofy selves for a while talking about characters. So it's been a blast, and once again, I can't thank you enough for having me on again, because like I said, I do genuinely love the show.
Thank you. Yeah. And I've said many times, I said on the last episode, I've said it on other podcasts recently, Cane and Rinse is one of the two primary inspirations for this podcast. So I appreciate you coming on, and I love the show. I recommend it every chance I get. And then Character Issues has become a lot of fun to listen to as well. And it's like you said, it's a much different vibe, a different dynamic. You guys, it's a lot more irreverent, if I can say that in a positive way.
I think you're giving us a lot of credit there.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. And
thank you so much.
I need to tune into a podcast every now and then to remind me how shitty Chadley is as a character and as an idea, everything about him.
Yes, the only character that has, well, I mean, rest in peace to the scoring system, but the only character that ever received a negative score, and firmly is currently our 53rd worst, the worst character of all time, sitting at the 53 spot. So, long may he reign.
Yes, a negative score is going to be hard to top. We're going to have to dig deep. And if you can spoil, who's near the top right now in the rankings?
I'm happy to spoil it. We include it in the show notes with every podcast. Our number one video game character of all time currently is Ichiban Kasuga from Yakuza Like a Dragon. Yes.
I certainly cannot argue with that. So I will recommend, as always, that everyone check out Kane and Rinse for deep dive, analytical, thoughtful video game discussions, and check out Character Issues for the scientific ranking of all the video game characters from Ichiban Kasuga all the way down to Chadley.
Yes.
So down in the show notes, you'll find links to both of those shows.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah. Let's get into our game for today, which is Nier Replicant, which is an action RPG originally developed by Kavia, hope I'm saying that right, and published by Square Enix for the PS3 and the Xbox 360 in the year 2010. But you and I assume we're both going to be talking about the remaster, remake. They never labeled it in a way that I can find consistently. They came out in 2021, which was developed by Toy Logic, again published by Square Enix. The remake is the one with the big decimal at the end of it. Version 1.2247448713969420225337. I started making those up somewhere through there, so see if you can catch where I started. Elevator pitches for Nier Replicant. I have a feeling that a lot of people listening will have familiarity with its sequel, Nier Automata, which I did an episode on back in the fall. But we'll get into personal histories and stuff, but I feel like people are just less familiar with this game. They just kind of know it's there and it's in the series. So a little elevator pitch that I wrote is this is a nihilistic trip through a story about a boy trying to save his sister from one of gaming's premier auteurs. What did you bring, Brian?
So the way I could try to distill this down to one sentence, and it rambles on, and which maybe goes in line with some of the game's themes too.
Yes,
is a boy tries to save his sister from a terrible disease by enlisting the services of a pompous magical book and a vulgar femme fatale to uncover the mystery of the ailment. Subsequently, finding out that there is much more to their world than they believed.
Yes. And that is something that leads us directly into the spoiler policy for this episode. So, as with Nier Automata, if you've played that, or most video games that are covered on the show, the story to this game is very important to your enjoyment of it. So we're not going to spoil any big revelations about the story. We're going to set it up probably what you find out in the first 2 to 3 hours, something like that. But this game is longer than that. It took me 35 hours to get through it. Was that about your experience?
Yeah, I think my final clock, which is kind of a little misleading with where the last save point was just under 40. So just under 40 hours I spent with it.
Not a short game. So we're going to set up the story, but we're definitely not going to spoil any of the many, many revelations that the story has for us. So we begin each episode by talking about what brought us to the game, what brought us to the series, if we played any other games in the Nier or the Drakengard series or anything like that. So Brian, why Nier Replicant?
So much, I think similar to you, Dave, and you'll explain in a minute. My first experience with Nier was Nier Automata, and that was a game I adored. A lot of people describe that game as coming out of nowhere, and for me, that was absolutely my experience. The demo got a lot of buzz, that first big mech fight, and then you started hearing some things about the story, and I'm like, this seems very much like a game for me. And so I picked it up near to launch, and played through it, the multiple playthroughs, which kind of ties into this game too, and completed it over the course of a few weeks. And so when Nier Replicant was announced, I was very excited because I was Nier, to me, the original Nier, the PS3 Niers, I can see it. I can visualize that game in the bargain bin of the GameStop I used to go to. Like I can see the cover. I can see it was always such a game that felt very nondescript to me when I was literally judging it by its cover. And then now I get to go back and experience through the lens of someone who had played Automata. So I was very excited. I got the game close to release, played the first 5 or 6 hours, and then something shiny floated by, and I got distracted. And I'd always been looking for a reason to come back to it, but had never quite made the time, because of life and other podcast scheduling and stuff like that. So that when you had reached out to me and said, "Hey, this is a game I'm considering covering," I leapt right. I'm like, "Yep, I'm going to play this game right now." So that was kind of my experience.
Awesome. Yeah. I was the same as you, except I played Automata first, and I didn't hear about it when it released, though, because it came out, I think it was 2017, when I was not really playing video games much then. So I missed it. That was one of those games, and it's a recurring story on the show, that I bought a PS4 in 2019. I Googled top 10 PS4 games, Nier Automata. So I bought it pretty much sight unseen, played it, loved it. I knew there was a game before it because I started, reading and listening to stuff about Automata, but the prevailing conversation around the original Nier is that it has a really good story, but the gameplay is terrible. So I was like, well, I don't have a PS3 or an Xbox 360 anyway, so whatever. I guess I'm not playing that. But then the remake got announced. Then the conversation about the repetition and the tedium that's in this game started to come out and resurface when this Replicant version came out. And I thought to myself, not for me. That doesn't sound very fun. But I started gradually over time to, I replayed Nier Automata for this podcast, and I started to think like, hey, I love that game so much. You should go back and play that one. Like, don't let some people on the internet saying it's tedious put you off. And then friend of the show, Rick from Pixel Project Radio, invited me to come on his show to discuss Nier Replicant. So I was like, well, I'm doing it now, of course. So, and then, I'm not sure if it's the same way for you, Brian. Well, you don't make the Kane and Rinse schedule, but...
No, I leave that to my benevolent overlords to let me know which ones I'm going to be on. Yeah.
Yes. I was going to say, it's really hard for me to play a 35, 40-hour game and then not talk about it on this show. Because I just don't have enough time to do that. So it became an episode here too. So the difference though, and if you want to hear like a detailed beat by beat walkthrough of the story, that's what I did over on Pixel Project Radio. That's not what we're doing here today. Even in the spoiler section, we are going to walk chronologically through the story, but we're not going to hit every beat that happens. So if you want that, Brian, listeners, listen to Pixel Project Radio, because I did that over there. And Rick is an awesome host over there. So
it's downloading in the background as we speak.
Thank you. Yes. Into some opening thoughts here about Nier Replicant. I think that this game, number one, first and foremost, is very good. And that those things with the tedium and the frustration and the repetition that I mentioned before, those were correct. Those things that I read were correct, and they did affect my play experience. And then they wrapped into the story in a way that I think is interesting, and we're going to talk about that. This is the story is really, really good. I enjoyed the story a lot. I kind of knew from playing Nier Automata that I should expect to have my world turned upside down many times, and that did happen. And I did enjoy that a lot. So I come out of this experience, especially as I get further and further in time, and I remember the tedium less, and I remember the story and the music and all of those amazing things more. I really liked my experience with this, and I will continue to like it probably more and more as time goes. How about you?
Yeah, I don't want to just echo everything you just said, but my experience is very similar. The interesting thing, and you've already mentioned the tedium a little bit, is I remember those moments in my playthrough from the start right through, and as the story progressed. I remember those moments frustrating me at the time as I was physically putting in the inputs to my controller, as I was controlling the characters and doing the various tasks. I remember thinking that this game may, or almost, it was attempting to waste my time in places where it felt like it. But as you said, as my playthrough went through, And now that I've had about, let's say 3-4 weeks to sit and marinate on it and to really think about the story beats and think about everything else, I forget those moments more and more. And I remember the things I loved more and more as I kind of reflect on the game. It's a really interesting progression of story. And I am thankful for playing it because it did lead me to even appreciate things about Nier Automata more than I already had, that I already thought I appreciated. It gave me a new perspective on that. So after my 40 hours, it becomes one of those things that I'm not sure if this is a game that I will ever need to replay. But it is something that I will look back on fondly as a total whole experience.
100%. And we're going to take a little music break. I already mentioned the music's great, so we can just get that started. When we come back, we're going to do the story setup and talk about the story and characters.
You provide a second in your purpose and theme. Nuestro mind, no intentarci. Utro e poi ci sinda che piani. Non
So in Nier Replicant, you play as a young boy. Canonically, his name is Nier, but you can and should type in your own name. And the beginning kind of sets up, actually, real quick, the story with this is the original Nier that we got here in the United States was not a boy and his sister. It was a father and his daughter, because they thought that we could not appreciate a story about a brother and sister, which, whatever. But yeah, I'm glad they brought it back to the brother and sister. I do think that it's a little bit more interesting that way, especially with the deluge of dad games that we have here in the video game space now. So Nier is trying to protect his sister. Her name is Yona, and she's sick. And we are in a kind of post-apocalyptic situation. They're in like an abandoned grocery store. Both of them have these weird books with them. These monsters attack. They're called shades, and they look like shadow monsters. Basically, they have this really interesting like golden or like bright yellow.
Yeah, like a sheen
design to them too.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's constantly moving too. It's a very interesting design with them.
I think they reminded me a lot of the character designs of the Heartless from Kingdom Hearts in this a less cartoony form. And I know that people will laugh at that if they know me, because I bring up Kingdom Hearts every chance I have. But there's a animalistic quality to them in the way that they move. They're both bipedal, but also on all fours at times. And the way they kind of appear from the ground and the way they swarm and attack did remind me of that. It was like the essentially shadow monsters that when you start to tell their differences based on their formation, their size, just kind of the way the character is designed, and you find yourself identifying them independently of one another based on what really isn't a lot of visual data, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah. The reason I laughed there is not because of you and your proclivity to talk about Kingdom Hearts. It's because on that podcast with Rick, he said Kingdom Hearts Heartless too, and I've never played Kingdom Hearts, so I have no idea what they look like.
Yeah.
So there we go. Everyone else, you get it. They're like the Heartless. So these shades attack Yona and Nier, and Nier uses his book to gain magical powers. He tells Yona to not touch her book. You get the feeling these are dangerous. He touches his, he gets these crazy magical powers. You're playing, this is an RPG, you level up like 35 times in a minute and a half. Like you can tell this is power. This is real power here. And you destroy all the shades. You go back. It is inferred that Yona has touched her book and she appears to die and then fade to black. And that's kind of your prologue chapter. So before we get further into the story, what did you think of that prologue, this opening?
I found it a really effective cold opening for the game, because it establishes your core values in a matter of moments in a way that a lot of JRPGs kind of tend to drag out. Like the infamous boy with no name in a town, a villager leaving town for the first time because of some magical, quest or object or ancient evil. You don't, a lot of times those opening moments are filled with dialogue and not action. And for this to kind of flip that concept on its head and within, let's call it a minute or two, you are essentially battling what feels like an unending horde of these monsters, as you said, gaining power, leveling up very rapidly, and you kind of get a sense that this might be a short journey you're having with this particular character, at least this in this particular setting. And it is interesting to open up that game in this way, revealing to you that power, but also having it act as your combat tutorial as well. It's a nice way to mask those things into something more engaging as the person playing it.
Right. I like how you said that it establishes the core things that you care about and that you should know about this world, all in the manner of about 5 or 10 minutes. Yona is sick. You care about Yona. There are dangerous magical books. There are shades out there. And that's, those are some of the core values that follow you through the rest of the game right there. So it's really interesting how you get pretty much right into the action. You get thrown off guard a little. If you play RPGs, you should be thrown off guard a little bit by the fact that you level up over 30 times in a minute and a half. That only happens in key moments in very specific games. That I'm thinking of. So that prologue ends, and then there's a time skip of 1,412 years where two people, a brother and sister, who look the exact same as the characters you just left literal thousands of years ago, named Nier and Yona. Yona is sick, and she's infected with this disease called the Black Scrawl, which I knew from playing Automata is mentioned in Automata, but the Black Scrawl is really interesting too from it's a disease, a fatal disease, but the way that they show it in the game, the way they design it, it's visually represented more than just like, someone coughing or something like that. You get these scrawls, these lines of these horrible black text scrolling up and down people's limbs. It's like visually very cool, but also like, I don't want to make COVID comparisons here, but like we've all had so much experience in real life and in media of deadly diseases. I've never seen one made out of words. And so I don't know what this is. I don't know what to do with this. We don't know how to cure this. We're going to get a vaccine for language. How does that work?
Right. Yeah. The way there's those like glyphs, almost like hieroglyphs, are spinning around her leg and kind of spinning around her as Yona's having these, I'm not sure you call them episodes or essentially good days and bad, as it seems, fighting this disease. And it just, you get that feeling of helplessness right away and that yearning for Nier to solve this problem. And he feels, whether justified or unjustified, that it is his problem to solve, that he is the one who is going to cure his sister. He will do anything. His sole purpose is to find a cure for this Black Scrawl. And, and seeking that out kind of becomes your motivation, your impetus to leave the house, to go out, to do things, while constantly reminding her that she's the one who's ill, needs to stay back, needs to rest, needs to take care of herself, while you are essentially the one going out to find a miracle cure, as it were. Right.
And like you said, that's Nier's sole motivation here. He really doesn't care about anything else, and he doesn't, this isn't a quest to save the world from like the evil, like a dragon or something, I don't know, some JRPG shit. But his motivation is to make money to buy medicine, or make money to like keep pursuing a way to cure Yona. And that's his sole motivation. So everything that you're doing, and we're going to get into some of the stuff like the side quests you're doing to make money and how that is kind of represented in this game.
Yep.
It's all for Yona, and they make that very clear at the beginning. You're doing odd jobs for people. You're, going to go kill some stuff out in the plains. It's all to serve that one purpose of helping Yona.
Yep.
So the inciting event here, is that Yona learns of a magical flower called a lunar tear. Thank you to Devila and Popola, her two characters. They're kind of like the leaders in the village, for basically telling this young girl, like, oh yeah, this really rare thing. It's over in this place called the Lost Shrine. It's super dangerous. No one goes there anymore. It's over there. And then she goes to the Lost Shrine. We have to go rescue her 'cause she's in danger. Nier finds a magical book there named Grimoire Weiss, who offers to like make a pact in order to help save Yona because there's a bunch of shades. She's unconscious when you find her. So Grimoire Weiss is the reason that you get your magic in the game. He becomes one of your companion characters. He's the first companion character you meet here. How would you describe Grimoire Weiss to people?
He's this tome of all powerful magic and what seems to be almost omniscient levels of knowledge. Where he knows everything. He certainly talks like he knows everything. He's got a very pompous drawl to his voice. He is constantly berating you for the silly things you're doing and his wisdom. Yet he also has, for either at the beginning, it kind of explains it as you've hit him, so he's lost some of his memory. But as it kind of goes on, he's not really aware of his origin. He remembers bits and pieces of where he came from, what his purpose is, and he becomes the literal, kind of cloud hanging over your head, reminding you what you're doing, but also grants you that power. And through this power, this power is represented by essentially words that you find throughout the world, and then the most powerful of which being the sealed verses, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Yeah.
But he's kind of, he takes the place of your knowledgeable companion, your partner in this quest, and Nier kind of latches onto him because Grimoire Weiss knows of this black scroll, has seen it before, thinks he understands maybe how to cure her of this, and Nier being Nier, he is, wait, you know how to fix Yona? Okay, what do we need to do? What do you need me to do for you? Because everything I do has to lead to saving her. So it kind of becomes that persistent thought in the back of your head, and Grimoire Weiss, his motivations simultaneously become Nier's motivations because the end goal is the same in curing and saving Yona.
Right. And those sealed verses that you mentioned, we're on the quest for those because it turns out once you get back to town, I believe it's Devila is singing a song that is about Grimoire Weiss finding the sealed verses and saving the world. And so that's it, a little serendipitous, but that is the quest now. We're on the quest to go find these sealed verses that are, it's powerful magic that's going to allow us to cure the Black Scroll, solve whatever your problems are. You'll be able to solve it. So on the quest, you also run into two other characters that I want to talk about. The first one is named Kaine. She's a woman dressed in some sort of lingerie that I don't have the vocabulary for, but you see her entire ass throughout most of the game.
Like almost uncountable amount of times. The amount to the amount where when you're going through the game, it becomes less and less shocking by how much they just full on show it to you. Like it's literally in your face all the time.
And Kaine is not only dressed that way, she has a very let's say aggressive personality. She is very vulgar in the way that she speaks. Yeah, what do we think about Kaine? Because she's one of the main three companions that we have.
Yeah, I think so. I feel multiple ways about Kaine. I think she's a remarkable character in this game. I think that some of her creative profanity I have adopted for personal use. I think that she has a very much a way with words, and her motivations and her kind of backstory become not just central to the game, but her plight in and of itself is not dissimilar from Yona's. It just feels like she doesn't have a brother to solve it for her. And second of all, she's purely motivated by revenge and vengeance.
Yes.
And it makes her a very compelling character to get to know. And then on the other hand is the physical representation of Kaine, where, as she said, like she could not be more scantily clad unless she was nude. Somehow somehow, like, if she were wearing a bikini, it would be somehow more modest because it wouldn't have the same suggestions that her outfit that she is wearing has. So it becomes this kind of pull, this back and forth, where I think she's this deep and compelling and rich character, and I think she's got tons of backstory that I'm interested in finding out, and I want to learn about her history, which you do several times over, and I want to know more about her. I want to spend more time with her. I find her interaction, specifically with Grimoire Vice, to be really some of the best dialogue in the game. But then it's also kind of juxtaposed against this visual representation, which is just unnecessary, I think would be fair.
I was going to say it feels needless, and the story behind it is that this was not a Yoko Taro original design. This was presented to him. He originally wasn't into it, and then kind of came around on it. I'm kind of like you. It feels very unnecessary to me, but at the same time, I do think it's she's sort of like the comic relief in this game. And so the way that she's dressed juxtaposed with what she's saying and how vulgar she is and how much of a badass she is. Yeah. It's a contrast that I think is interesting. Sure. But in a vacuum, if you show me that design, I think it's very unnecessary and almost doesn't fit the rest of the game because no one else is dressed like that. And there's no real reason for her to be dressed like that, which is kind of a line that I personally draw whenever I'm, thinking about character designs like this. I have a reputation for being very anti horny character designs. Sure. And I'm like not as down on Kaine's because of that contrast. It at least gives something else to her. She's not just dressed like that and then that's her whole character. It's actually very little of her character because no one else talks about it. But it is unnecessary, I think.
Yeah, I think it would be way more flagrant if she was just some vacuous shell who didn't bring substance to the game. I'm with you. I'm not. So it's tough to talk about only because of the fact that I don't think it's really my place to talk about it. But I'm not anti-horny designs of anything if that is specifically related to the intent of the product or the intent of the design. And people can be into what they're into, and I think that's there's a whole big internet out there for anybody who wants to search for whatever they want. But within the context of this game, her visual design is the only thing that like kind of trips me up with her because everything else, as you said, like, and I barely mentioned the combat stuff, which is pretty important because she is a badass. I mean, she can absolutely tear through these shades, and she is clearly a very powerful character who's keeping a very dangerous force at bay constantly. And so that juxtaposed with her character design, it was one of those things that always tripped me up to the point where when it would happen later on in the game, I would laugh out loud at it. Just because it almost like screeched everything to a halt for a minute. It would remind me what she looked like because most of the time I was just interested in the things she was saying, the things I was learning about her and her history and everything else.
Yeah, and you said it before, and I agree with you that her story is really good. It's really compelling. The things that you learn about her backstory are number one, way more than you learn about most of the characters, and you learn about the next character we're going to talk about too. His backstory. Those two together have really interesting backstories, and the way that Kaine interacts with the rest of the group, like you said, she and Vice are constantly going back and forth. She's demeaning him because he's so full of himself. She's taking the piss out of him. He's calling her a hussy, which is a very funny word to me. You don't hear that very often. And then her interactions with Emile, who's the next character, they have a very sweet relationship that I just like constantly. Anytime you got those two talking to each other, it was so cute. So Emile is a young boy, maybe, 10, 12 years old, something like that. I didn't write it down, if they even told you. But he's your last character that joins you. And Emile, you may know from, number one, from Nier Automata, he makes an appearance, but from the mask that Yoko Taro wears during his appearances. And it's like the logo of the Nier series and of him in general. That's from Emile, his character design. So I think that Emile is like, sounds weird to say, one of my favorite children in games, but he's such a sweet little boy. And the contrast between Vice, who's this like you said, this pompous book who knows everything or thinks he knows everything. Kaine, who's this vulgar woman, scantily dressed, and then Emil, who's just a very sweet little boy.
Yeah. Yeah, he's kind of that innocence personified, in that game. And the things that you learn about him moving forward are always kind of framed around that innocent nature that he has. He is that voice, along with Nier. Nier has a lot of this too, but for some reason, when Nier is being, let's say, innocent or optimistic or chill, he's got Grimoire Weiss and Kaine kind of bringing him back to the reality of the situation. But when Emil is just being that innocent boy that he is, it rings genuine. And the way that dialogue comes across, specifically, there's moments between Emil and Kaine that are just somehow so heartfelt in an unbelievable scenario, right? Like that you really feel like these two characters have this genuine relationship. They genuinely care for each other. And it's kind of amazing how that character develops. Cause for me, coming into Nier Replicant, playing Automata first, Emil was just that mask, was just that small character from Automata. And to see his whole backstory fleshed out here was wonderful. And it became one of my, one of the things that, learning new things about the Nier world through this game. The Emil story was one of those things that I like. Now that character means a lot more to me than he ever did before.
Right. Emil and Devila and Popola as well. Absolutely. Yep. So the reason I wanted to camp out and talk about the characters a little bit in a way that I didn't really do in the Nier Automata episode is because, not to talk too much about Automata, but I thought that game, that story was much more about the plot than it was the characters. You could have kind of replaced those characters, I feel like, with another of their archetype, and it would have been a very similar plot, which, they're androids, so whatever.
Yep.
Like they are replaceable. These characters, I think, stand out a lot more, and I appreciate the group dynamic and the character development in this game a lot more than I did in Automata. And it's a big thing. Like, if people are listening to this and they played Automata and enjoyed it, I think that this is one of the clear strengths that this game has, is this group of characters and how they interact with each other.
Automata could be a very isolating and lonely experience at times, even when 2B and 9S were together. And I know you said, and I agree with you, I don't want to make this a show where we just talk about Automata again.
Compare and contrast.
But but we, coming from both of our lenses, having played that game first, it does inform a lot, at least for me, it informs a lot of my opinions on this game. And it was nice to kind of have this core group of personalities that you really felt like you were attached to, and you had investment in the outcome of each of these characters' stories. Because if you think of the gameplay of Nier Replicant versus Nier Automata, they're not that different. You have your melee attacks and you have your drone in Automata that's constantly firing bullets and doing the magic, but your drone in Replicant is Grimoire Weiss, who is a living, speaking character with opinions and facts and gives subtext and adds nuance to every interaction. And it feels much more like a group journey in a sense, as opposed to just the story of one character at a time as you're moving through it. And I think that benefits the story in the long run, because by the end, I wasn't just concerned about Yona. I was concerned about an entire cast of characters that I'd now come to appreciate and enjoy.
Yeah. And that's not to say I wasn't concerned about what happened to 2B and 9S either,
right.
But I felt it in a stronger way in this game. So that is a clear thing that I think this game does really well, is it builds this core cast of 4 characters, and they are awesome. All 4 of them. Even if, Weiss is kind of annoying sometimes, but that's his character. And maybe I didn't care about what happened to him as much as Kaine and Emil and Nier and Yona, but he's part of the group too, and that group is a clear thing that stands out. So this game works with some themes and like kind of through lines through the plot that I want to touch on a little bit, obviously not spoiling things. I mentioned nihilism earlier. The tasks that Nier is doing to make money to try to help Yona, they start to get repetitive. You start to wonder if this is going to matter. What are we even doing here? The characters mention this too. This is a clear thing that also plays into the tedium that we talked about before.
Yeah.
This game has, in my opinion, mechanically some of the worst side quests that I've ever played in a game. I see you nodding your head. You're with me here.
Yes, I am. Yeah, and I think based on our correspondence that we were having during my initial hours of the game, I believe I made grand claims to you, like, I'm going to get all 1,000 achievement points in this game, and I'm going to do every side quest because I'm enjoying it so much. And that quickly fades. And having played it now in completion, and I'm not sure if that was wholly intentional by the developers or partly intentional, but I do believe there was some intent there.
Yes.
Because there is, without a doubt, you mentioned nihilism and you mentioned just kind of these tasks that feel very much like there's something out of like a prison labor camp of moving one pile of rocks to another space and then back.
Yes.
With no real purpose behind it. And the game does a wonderful job of making you feel that way in a lot of different aspects, and then later on kind of peeling those layers back to make you question your motivations from before, to make you think about things you may do in the future. And that tedium, that repetition becomes part of that process to a point where I went from not minding it to almost hating it to then completely rebounding to respecting it on a level I wasn't sure that I'd get to.
Yeah, I think that arc works for me too. At the beginning, I was like, oh, these side quests are, again, I played Automata first. That game has shitty side quests too.
Yep,
so I'm
sure.
like, okay, cool. And then these are much more repetitive, much more, I need you to get 10 logs, 6 beetles, and 10 pieces of plastic. I don't know. And then come back to me when you did, and I'll give you another quest just like it.
Yeah. There was a fishing side quest that was particularly, one of which was involved in the main story. You had to catch a fish at one point, but then beyond that, you could continue this line of fishing quests, and there were like 7 of them. And they were just like, it was just needle and haystack stuff. What bait do I need to use? Where do I need to go to try to catch this fish? And each reward that you got from that was a literal lecture from your fishing master that made the screen go black because Nier became so bored during it. And then it said a certain amount of time, and then you would go, and then he'd give you another fishing quest. Like, so on the nose of just, what am I gaining from this? And not really knowing it, but still feeling compelled to do. And that was interesting to me, if not on some levels very frustrating, but on some levels kind of effective in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and there's, like you said, that fishing quest. I didn't do it because I tried the first part of the first fishing quest, because the one in the main story, you just go buy a fish. It's fine. The next one where they tell you to go catch something, this game has one of the worst fishing mini games I've ever played.
Oh, yeah.
Makes me want to kill fishing mini games in general. Just no more. This, and after like 60 hours of fishing in Fire Emblem 3 Houses, which is another terrible fishing mini game.
Very bad.
But you have to do it. Yep. Anyway, all of those things and all of these quests and the shuttle running, which played into your intro, Brian, the amount of times where one character will say, I need you to go to this place. You go there. I don't have the thing that other character needed. I need you to go to this place and get these things for me. Come back here, and then I'll give you that thing, and then you can go back to the original place, and then maybe the quest is over. Maybe you'll need to go to that place again. And all these shuttle running and these collectathon side quests, there is a point to them. I truly think there is a point to them by the creator. Yeah. But they suck in play.
Do.
There's awful.
There's one in particular, a very flagrant one that I remember where you are, and this might be part of the main story, but because I remember, but either way, you're looking for the there's a particular couple that is bickering. And this one character goes off, and they say he's going to visit his brother in the main town. So you go to visit his brother in the main town who's a guard, and you get to his brother who's a guard and says, oh, yeah, he was just here. He just went back to the town you were just at. On the same path you just took. You didn't cross paths. You know what I mean? Like you just get there and it triggers the fact that so you just ran this. It's really not that long of an amount, but when you're doing it for the 15th, 20th, 30th, 40th time, it becomes just that like, moment of just like, all you did was make me run from here and back, and then he's going to be there. It was just like one of those like rip what little hair I have left out moments. Like and the game is peppered with those for sure.
And again, I think there is a reason to it. This is part of the storytelling, part of making you feel the way the main character feels, because again, the characters comment on this. They're like, hey, this sucks, right? And I'm like, dude, yeah, it does.
Yeah.
You commenting on it doesn't help me at all. Not that that's the point of the game, but I do want to kind of echo what you said, that there was a middle portion of this game where, especially when I was doing side quests, because you need to, I really did not want to play this game during the middle portions. Sometimes it was like, I know if I put 2 hours into Nier, I'm going to do some bullshit side quests. I'm going to do one main story thing. Then it's going to be time to go to bed. And that doesn't sound very fun to me.
No.
But it pulls it off. It sticks the landing. And if you just take a second to think about that at the end, I do think that there's a theme and like I said, a through line to all of this that is pinpointed at the end if you just think about it a little bit.
Yep.
And that's spoiler talk for sure.
Yeah, I agree completely without going more into it. I think, and we certainly will.
Yes. The other thing that kind of feeds into this tedium is repetition, because I kind of, in the Nier Automata episode, and these games have a reputation for this now, so I'm not going to like shy away from talking about it. In the Nier Automata episode, I caution people, like, do not believe people who say that you have to play this game 5 times in a row, because that's not how that game works. Right. That is kind of how this game works, Nier Replicant. And so you should know that going in. Each time you play through the story, you'll get new revelations about story and character backstory and stuff, but you are going to go through the same plot beats at least 3 times. Yep. And that kind of sucks. Again, I'm already feeling the tedium and frustration from the way the quests are designed. Now I'm feeling it because I'm doing some of those same quests for the 3rd time.
Yeah.
You know?
And in my head, I was doing, when doing this, I was doing time jump skips in my head, believing that the next quest was going to be this.
Yes.
And forgetting about some 15 to 45 minute segment that I had to do, and just groaning, being like, oh, I have to go back to the junk heap, and I've got to go down 2 levels and come back up and get a card and go back down and then jump through this hole, but that's not when the boss is going to be there. I'm going to come back up and jump back down through the hole. It's, oh my goodness. Yeah. It's one of those things where I do feel like Nier Automata, did get, I don't want to say unfairly, but at least incorrectly described as that, where there are multiple playthroughs, and giant air quotes, playthroughs of that game. But there's a different protagonist in some ways, and there's different things, and there's, you might be on a similar timeline, but doing a completely separate event, or the gameplay is shift dramatically. And this game is not that.
Yes.
You can definitely see the lineage where those ideas coming from this game to Automata were taken and built upon and iterated on and made better and refined. And, but yeah, this game does have, sections, particularly, in the later stages of the game, when you're approaching the final end, where you're doing things that now for the 3rd time that you might not find yourself having the patience to want to do. But for me, and I think you felt the same way when talking to you about it, what I was seeking out from doing that, my end goal, whatever the story reveal would be, whatever new information I was getting along the way, became my motivation for doing it again. And it became much less about the actions I was doing to get there. It was way more about the goal. And I found myself by that end willing to sacrifice my time, quite literally what you're doing. You're sacrificing time you've already spent doing the exact same thing. But I was making that sacrifice willingly in order to find out what I wanted to find out.
Yep. I totally agree. And so, like, when I was going through those repetitions, I was feeling the tedium of the play, but I was still driven by, like you said, what I was hoping to happen. By going through this, you obviously have an end goal in mind, like you said, and I was driven by seeing how that would play out.
Yeah.
And so it's a really interesting thing. Like, I was thinking about this, and we'll continue this in the spoiler section when we have specific things to talk about, but the value that this frustration and tedium has to the story, I think is kind of irreplaceable. Like, I think if you took that out of this game, you would have a lot less to think about once you finish the game, if that makes sense. Are you with me here?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that it's that journey, as like kind of cliche of it, like, it's not always about the destinations, it's about the journey to get there. And I feel like this game does kind of take some of that and turn it on its head, because that journey you're making has been a journey that you've already made, that you've already done these things.
Yes.
You've already experienced these things, but the destination will be altered in some way, or your frame of reference for that destination may get changed by the things you learn along the way. And it's an interesting take. And what I think would probably be a difficult sell, to get people on board with that. Like, you're asking a lot of the player, but I tend to get excited about games that ask difficult things of me, or at least get me to challenge my common thought practices of what a video game should be and how this should go from A to B to C. And this game is definitely a game that did that on multiple occasions. And at some points it frustrated me, and other parts I was full on delighted by it.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Now that I'm finished and I have the benefit of looking back on this thing that's done, I agree there is value to this. It plays into the story, and I'm not sure that what Yoko Taro is trying to say would not hit as in such an interesting way without this. I'll say that. I do want to mention, I'm not sure if people are aware of this, if you played the original Nier or if you're coming to this fresh, there is a new route, they call them in the Nier games. We call them, I don't know, a new ending, a fifth ending in this. And you do need to collect all the weapons to get that. I think there's 33 weapons
33, yep.
in the game. You need to get all of them to do that. And the process of getting those is part of that tedium, for sure. So I do want to point that out, because if you're playing the newer version, the Replicant version, it would be a shame to miss on that ending. If you're the type of person who doesn't read guides or anything like that, it would be a shame to miss that, because it is really good story content.
Sure.
But it is kind of gated behind that. I want to let people know.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that I've absolutely played with a weapon guide open.
Yes, me too.
Because it became very clear to me by as I was getting further on and things that happened, that I now wanted to see everything. And in order to do that, I had to complete this literal checklist. So I wanted to make sure to have it up for me. And for me, that didn't hinder my experience. I know sometimes guides can take away for certain people. They don't normally bother me. I normally use them as a means to get past frustrating obstacles. But in this one, it was really just as a means for my own mental survival to know that this is where I'm going, and I'm going to get all these things.
Yes, because had I completed that third repeat playthrough and missed one weapon and had to do it all over again, I would have been actually mad. So
yes, 100%. 100%.
All right, so we have talked about the story. We're going to listen to some music, and then we're going to come back and talk about how this game looks and how it sounds. So this game is interesting, I think, because this game has a ton of atmosphere, I think. So it plays into the story, of course, but I'm kind of the opinion that most areas of this game look generic, and they look like a PS3 game that's been remastered a bit. I think that there's a couple areas that are visually striking. Most of them I think are not. And it's incredible to me how much the music carries the atmosphere in this game. I think it is thick. And if you played Nier Automata like the two of us, you probably expected this. And I was not let down by the music in this game at all.
No, Automata was one of my favorite soundtracks for sure. And this game kind of shows you where that was born from, and the thematic elements of the score and the themes. And there are these wonderful moments, and this is a moment that I will never shut up about for anybody who ever gives me a chance to talk about it. There's this theme that's constantly playing, this kind of lute and drum theme that's playing in the main town, and Devila is most times either sitting at the fountain or in the tavern.
Right.
And when you get close to her, like the proximity, whatever clicks in, and you start to hear her vocals for this song. And that moment, the first time I walked out of that house, I'm going out, and I'm crossing the town, and I hear those vocals. I just go up to her, and I was just frozen. Just sat there and listened to it until it started to loop again. It was one of those things that like I had to kind of pry myself away from doing from time to time, because it added, just like you said, thick. This layer of like, this layer of emotion that I didn't even have really a right to feel yet, but I felt like it was going to mean something at some point. And man, the term "take your breath away" is way overused, but there were moments in that game when musical cues and you go in some of the fields when you run out this theme and you see these landscapes. It's just kind of like you said, the visuals aren't exactly stunning or breathtaking, but there's moments where this game is just like it hits you right in the chest with this weight, the weight of the music with what you're doing. It's impressive stuff.
Mm-hmm. For me, it was the moment when you walk into the Eyrie for the first time, which is one of the actually visually striking places you go. It's this two sides of a canyon, basically, with these wooden, what's the word? Boardwalks, basically.
They're like long wooden bridges, kind of with these platforms in the middle. That's kind of like this, almost like a mountaintop villagey type of feeling to it.
Right, and they have these strings with all these flags flapping in the wind that string across like the length of the canyon, and the music it's beautiful. It's like this choral arrangement with almost kind of like chanting in a way, and then there's a melody that you can follow, and it all hits at the same time. So you see this very visually striking place, the music kicks in, and you just put down the controller and just sit there for a little bit and just take it all in. And there were not lots of places that had the visual side of that for me, but most of them had the music side, like down A+.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I felt that way the first time. In fact, it's still the lock screen on my phone, the screenshot I took. You're running. It's in the field that you go across to get to the area. I forget which. I think maybe the northern field, whatever, where the big broken railroad bridge is. And there's these mountains in the background, and this music is playing, and the vocals kind of kick in after about 5 or 6 bars. And you can be ambushed by shades or sometimes by giant boars out there and other things. But there was this moment of just kind of standing there looking across this bridge that hadn't been built yet, and just seeing this landscape behind me, and just kind of like taking in that, like, wow, like video games, man. Like, all right, video games. These things rule, don't they? Yeah. Like it was one of those moments and this game is full of those, like you said, maybe not where it's not your, God of War, where you're gonna Ragnarok, where you're gonna use a photo mode and see Kratos's pores, right? It's not that, but it does have. It speaks a language that, like, if you're jiving with it, you are really into it, and and that's the way I ended up feeling, and for all of the repetition too, it's like a good JRPG battle theme, right? Like you're going to be doing these things dozens of times, and how do you feel less bad about that? It's like, well, if it's got a banger soundtrack, it's gonna make doing those things again a lot more palatable.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was the only thing that kept me from like putting the controller through the screen. Like the 75th time I had to go back to the junk heap. Because the song in the junk heap fucking rules.
Yes, it does. Yes,
and so like I'm going through that factory for literally the 20th time, but the song is great, and I can like at least jam to the song, kill some robots, and get through onto my destination.
You're hopping in that mine cart again as it
Yes.
moves slowly again. Like, there are moments there where you are just like, you're kind of at a loss for how, like, well, it gives you that, like, why am I doing this thing? And then the game will it'll provide some reason for it. And then you're like, oh, okay, that's why, and like it's full of those ups and downs. It really is something.
Yeah. The soundtrack is a little bit less dynamic than the one in Automata, which is like an incredible achievement in that game. This game has some of that dynamic soundtrack elements too. They're just not like as clear, I feel like. And there's no like 8-bit version of all the songs, which I love from the other game.
Yeah, me
but
too.
The way that the music still does build from a very basic version up to a more intense version, depending on what's going on, is still really impressive in this game too.
Yeah. They have, actually it's the soundtrack, Keiichi Okabe, I think I'm pronouncing that right. I apologize if I'm not. They're really good at establishing themes and establishing motifs that are reused throughout areas, but altered in just such a subtle or specific way that make you know you're in a different place, make you know you're in danger, make you know that you're safe. It's all of those things you want out of a soundtrack. It's not just a soundtrack that's pretty music. It's a soundtrack that can guide, that can provide relief or tension. Like like you said, it's not as dynamic as Automata, but it has what you need there. I think it has those core components that make you, when you're done playing it, it's one of those games for me personally that I could put on a Spotify playlist of this soundtrack right now and just be, thrilled from beginning to end, most likely.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned themes to it and kind of motifs. This game does have character themes for a lot of the main characters, which is something I wasn't expecting. So Kaine has her own music that plays during her story moments. Emil does too. Devil and Popola have the song you mentioned from The Village, which I recognized from Automata, from a key scene in that game. And then the way that those motifs are brought back, if I'm remembering all of my Pixel Project Radio music education, the way that those are brought back and reused in different emotional states throughout the game, it's really, really effectively done. Like the way that Uematsu is famous in Final Fantasy for doing that. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And it's like you said, it adds weight. It adds gravity to moments where the moment calls for it, and adds relief in moments where the moment calls for that relief. And it cannot be overstated that that the importance of the music to what you're physically doing during the game, it really does help kind of soothe some of the tensions you might be feeling because of it's a difficult emotional scene, or just because you're doing it for the 15th time. Like there's, it serves that purpose. It's always kind of there for the player in a way to kind of guide them to counsel them through whatever happy or horrible thing that's going on, in the story.
Yeah. Did you have any other kind of standout tracks or area themes or character themes from the game?
I would have mentioned the Junk Heap had you not already brought it up. I do think that the Desert Village has there's these moments when you're riding around the Desert Village on what is basically a sand taxi, and you're forced to sit and wait, and I do think that theme was very nice, very, I don't call it light, but it was very, it sounded like a desert theme. I don't know how else to explain it. It just does. It's like, I've never lived in a desert. I couldn't write you a theme right now that would lead to that, but it felt appropriate. And those treks out to that village sometimes were some of the longer and more tedious, specifically in when there's plot related things that we won't get into now. And also plot related things we'll get into now, when you're going to a place where you don't necessarily want to go because what is going to happen, what you already know is going to happen. It does provide that sense of guidance there. I can't say enough about it. I love it.
Yeah, 100%. The other thing I wanted to point out about the music that is a point of praise is that most of the songs have vocals in them, which is not something that most video games do. A lot of it's instrumental, and the vocals in this game are sung in a language that's not English. I believe it's made up for the the game, although it sounds an awful lot like Japanese to my untrained ear, but it's not Japanese. It's a made up language. So the vocals end up being another instrument rather than something that you have to like pay attention to what they're saying or something like that. And the melodies that the vocals have are so catchy, and not in like a fun poppy way, but catchy in a just an earworm way. And you have single vocals, you have choral vocals, like the one in the Airy is full choir. It sounds like it's intense, it's in your face. So I want to point that out because I really like video game vocals in music, and I think this is a great way to have that, but not have it distracting in any way. Like I loved listening to Persona 5 where there's words to the songs and stuff, but this one, it's just another instrument in the arrangement.
Yep. I found myself making up my own words to it, what I thought it sounded like. There was a good week after I finished the game where my 5-year-old son was wandering around the house just going, Mr. Mime, because we thought it sounded like Mr. Mime, and he thought that was pretty great. And it's one of those things that like having that be a made up language or a language that you might be a combination of different languages. It gives it that ability to just be that melody and not be anything that you need to try to either suss meaning out of, or vocals that you might want to ignore because they're not something you identify with either. So,
or because they're bad, which
is
some of the Persona 5 vocals, the lyrics, not great, if we're being honest. But I wanted to kind of camp out and talk about music for a while because I do think the music, like I said, provides so much of the atmosphere and so much of the mood. The other thing that provides mood and kind of emotion in the game is I think there's some pretty good voice acting especially by Kaine, and Vice is Vice. If you've heard him, you know what we're talking about. Kaine and Emil stand out to me as like very good and very emotional at times voice acting performances.
It sounds ridiculous if you were to look at Kaine's dialogue on paper, and then for me to tell you that I think that vocal performance is subtle in a lot of ways, you'd be like, what are you talking about? I mean, this like just overly vulgar, kind of like real crass on purpose type
telling
of...
a boss she's going to rip its fucking eyeballs out and piss in its eye sockets. Literal quote from Kaine.
Yes. So so she's definitely she's sorting through some stuff there, but there are moments where she is just kind of she brings that emotional resonance home in a way that I think, like, to be able to pull off both those things in a performance, I think is great. And I think Emil, there's just so much to that performance that I'd love to talk about. But I think first and foremost, without getting into any spoilery stuff, is that Emil goes through a lot.
Yes.
Emil goes through a lot. And the way that those vocals are after particularly challenging or emotional times were like, I've gotten, ever having kids, to be a little bit more of a sap than I was before. I've cried at certain games. I don't cry at every game, but I was on the verge a couple times with this Emil performance. Some of the things that were said after these challenging times, like, really brought home the gravity of the situation. And that performance, there were certain times playing through again and doing the things we already talked about where you'd be tempted to skip some cutscenes, because you've seen these things before and you just want to get to the next part, blah, blah, blah. And with the Emil segments, I always found myself just re-listening and kind of letting it wash over me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's not to say that Vice or Yona or Nier or Devil and Popola are not good. They are. They sound great. It's just there are some especially emotional scenes with Emil and Kaine, sometimes both of them together, that I do want to give them their extra props.
100%.
Like that. So let's listen to a bit more music when we come back. Let's talk about what it's like to actually play this game. Nier Replicant. We're going to be talking about the remaster, the Replicant version 1.22, whatever version. The original version, again, I heard the gameplay was very bad, even at the time. Not much variation to it. The remaster combat was updated to be more like Nier Automata. There was a consultant or a team member from Platinum Games named Takahisa Taura, if I'm saying that right. Almost certainly not, but overseeing it and making sure that it was close enough to what it was in Automata. What we got, I think, is it's not Platinum Games quality, I don't think. It's kind of like we have Platinum Games at home. And so it's good enough. It's fluid. It's entertaining. There's lots of flourishes, entertaining animations while you're fighting, but it is a very simple combat system at the end of the day. You have your hack and slash, your block, your dodge roll, and you have your magic. You have a light attack, heavy attack. You can shoot magic spells. You can charge up magic spells and shoot them, but that's it. And like part of the Platinum Games thing is doing those things to build up to stronger attacks, and there's just not anything to build up to in this game. So you are doing very similar combat. Most combat encounters are basically the same. And so it's fine. It's not bad. I didn't hate it, but I was also like, I played Bayonetta 3 a couple months ago now, which is a Platinum Games game. And the difference is apparent, even though there was an advisor from Platinum working on this.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that. The variation in enemy design, variation in combat encounters just seem to be how quickly can I either get behind this enemy or break this shield or oh, this enemy's got a pink bubble around it, so I can't use my magic, so I got to get in tight until the shield breaks. And there wasn't a lot of variation there. It did, like you said, have the flourishes. There's a great dodge mechanic that literally basically puts your character on ice skates for half a second and scoops you right around to the back of the character. And I use that all the time. And when you hit it and then and knock it and get one of the shades knocked out, like it does feel good when you hit it. But once you've done it once, you've kind of seen the thing, and it makes you do the thing often. I think that, I'm not sure if you had this, Dave. I had the claw grip problem where I always kept my magical attack kind of on that rapid fire, like the constant pulsing of like the bop, 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 bop. And so my pointer finger would always be on the right bumper, and I kind of have to like rearrange my hand to kind of like do the other attacks. And like by the end of a long session with Nier, I could kind of feel that in my pointer knuckle, just kind of like from constantly slamming on that right bumper. And the reason I did that wasn't because I needed to, it was just because it worked. So I just did it, and I wasn't really forced to change my strategy because there was nothing that the game put in my way to tell me that I had to. So I just kind of sat back on what I was comfortable with. There's some variation in weapons later on in the game where you can kind of heavier weapons or quicker weapons, but you're essentially you're swapping weapons for damage numbers. And if you have a decent weapon, no matter what the the size or style of it is, your damage per second is going to be fairly similar. So not a ton of variation there. Yeah.
The one way to mix it up, I feel like, is to use different magic, and you'll end the game with maybe like 10 magic spells. You don't have a whole lot. You can equip 2 of them at the same time. Or what I actually noticed and then forgot about and then noticed again while prepping for this is you can actually remap all of the bumpers and the triggers. So you can actually take away your dodge roll or your block if you want to equip 4 magic spells, for example. The game will let you do that. There's absolutely no reason to do that. But you can. So the way that I tried to mix up the combat was to mix in new magic spells. And I just wonder, like, did you mix it up or did you roll with similar stuff through the game?
I would mix it up for certain things just to kind of like try it. If I was going through another open field again, I knew that I would be swarmed by a particular type of shade. I would, I tried the shield for a little bit. I tried, there's the one that, it swarms up the spikes from the ground in a like kind of a cross pattern, and then you could kind of hold that for a bigger attack. I switched it up some, but I basically reverted to the Nier Automata, drone as Gatling gun type of stuff. That was kind of my baseline. I'd mix it up a little, but it really, that's the one I just kind of became comfortable with. And like you said, I could create that variety for myself, but the combat, I would say by 5 to 10 hours in, became quickly, it was not the thing I was there for, so I didn't think about it that much. It was more just an obstacle than an actual, than like a procedure to engage with to like get satisfaction out of.
Yeah. And what happened with me is kind of similar. Like I would mix it up, and then I would realize I don't really like the spell that has the spikes that come out of the ground. It's not as useful as it looks like it is. So I'm just going to go back to, like you said, the rapid fire one, and then the one that's called Dark Lance that shoots a lance. And you can charge that up and shoot like 10 lances. And that's what I did for most of the game. And then sometimes I'd be like, there's one spell where a giant, black hand materializes and you punch the enemy with this giant hand. But it's super slow and it's not as effective as I would like it to be. So back to the Dark Lance we go.
It almost feels like the game knew this as you went too, because the first couple times you get a new spell, it's this like thing. Like the game lets you know this is what it does. It almost kind of makes it like a form function of like the next enemy you face is going to be something the spell will be very useful against. And then it kind of abandons that. I'm not sure if that's just because the game wasn't designed with that in mind to begin with, or if it just became one of those things where it just felt like, like a Christmas tree where you're just hanging on more ornaments as you go. But like the only thing that really draws the eye is the star at the top of the tree. You know what I mean? Like it's just kind of, it doesn't weigh you down. It doesn't create enough of an obstacle that you need to think about it. And so I often chose not to. Yep.
And so this is the point where I'm going to make a recommendation for people, unless you are like morally opposed to it. Play this game on easy, because I don't think that there's anything in this combat that like this game's not difficult on the normal version.
Right.
But things have a lot of HP. And so battles will go on for longer than I felt like they should. And you are doing the same 3-hit combos over and over and over again, or 5-hit combos. And there's nothing bigger to build up to. There's no ultimate attack, like in a Bayonetta or something like that. So to cut down on some of that, maybe you get tired of the combat. I never got tired of it, but I was
right. Yeah.
There was a certain point 10, 15 hours in where I was like, I'm just going through the motions now. There's nothing new that this game's going to present to me. So my formal recommendation for people is to play this game on easy. And I told myself I was going to, and I would you can't change it unless you're in the main menu. And I would tell myself next time I start, because I'm too, I don't know, something wrong with my brain. I'm not going to quit out and change the difficulty now. Next time I boot up the game, I'll change it. But then I forgot every time.
Yep.
So don't be like me. Just play it on easy. You are not going to miss anything, I promise. This game doesn't have a worthwhile challenge for you in that way.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think that part of it, like a lot of people have a thing about playing on easy or normal. Some people want to play on the hardest difficulty. I just don't think this game does enough to warrant that. And I played through on normal because that was a setting very similar to you. I just kind of played on that. And I don't think that limiting the combat difficulty does anything, because with this game throws healing potions, medicinal herbs, everything at you, and at such a rate that it becomes inconsequential. It's one of those moments like, how many health salves do I want to use during this battle? And you have them. It's not really much of a consideration.
Right. So the one thing that I will say about the combat that I think is cool is that the boss fights are spectacles. Mm-hmm. Again, not super mechanically interesting. You may have to wait for a weak point to expose itself, or do the Legend of Zelda, the Dodongo's Cavern boss, where you pick up the bomb and throw it in its open mouth. You might have to do something like that, but there's not a real mechanical challenge to the bosses, but they are cool spectacles. Yeah. And so even when I was going through the game for the third time, seeing the same bosses for the third time, I was still enjoying those fights because they look cool, and at least it's something different. There's not that many boss fights in the game, so when they did come up, I was always pretty much up for it.
Yeah, me too. The character design on a lot of those bosses is interesting at the very least, and sometimes grotesque or hilarious or both. They vary in in style and shape and kind of there's one in particular that I'm thinking of that I won't mention because of spoilery stuff that is just massive. Like it rises out of the ocean in this kind of colossal way that it like sets you back because you hadn't seen anything quite like that to that point, and it's effective in that way. And yeah, but then again, the act of actually beating that boss is neither hard nor satisfying.
Right.
But they are something to behold. So
Yes.
yeah, it does create that interest there.
Yeah. And I forgot to mention this about like the general combat, but it really comes back to my memory when I'm thinking about the boss fights here. But a lot of enemies will attack you with melee, but most of them will shoot these big projectiles at you. And it's a 3D bullet hell type of thing. So that was always kind of interesting for me to try to avoid getting hit. And again, it's not hard. And if you do get hit, it's not a huge deal because it doesn't take a ton of health and you have 1 million healing items.
Yeah.
But I do think the 3D bullet hell is still fun, like on a very basic level. And then in the boss fights, those start to get into those like screen full of things to avoid, which are visually cool and, give me something to do besides that 5-hit combo.
It does like it's weird to say that this had vibes of a game that came out later than it. So maybe Returnal has Nier vibes or vice versa, but it gave me some Returnal feelings there when these kind of massive orbs start coming at you that are the size of or near to the size of your character, and you're forced to navigate this 3D space while kind of, falling back on some shoot 'em up game type tactics and things. And it does create for some interesting scenarios there for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't have a whole lot else to say about the gameplay itself. Like the combat, we talked about the side quests. We talked about the repetition, the levels, the way that they look. They're unspectacular in the way they look. I think most of them, there are a couple that are standout, like visually very cool. But the other thing about them is that the levels are empty. They're big, they're empty. This is not a game where I found myself wanting to explore every nook and cranny, because the most I'm going to find is, an item pickup used for a side quest or crafting materials or something like that. So despite how big, like the desert level you mentioned is pretty big, but I was never like poking around in all the corners of the map. I knew there was nothing there.
Yeah, that's where I think it wears its PS3 era design on it, kind of on its sleeves in this remake, because there really isn't a lot to do. That era of video games was kind of filled with these. Look, we can create this giant open space, which at the time was novel and new and really interesting, and we've obviously built on that over the years, but there's not much to do in those areas unless someone had given you a side quest which spawned a specific thing or event in that place. There wasn't going to be anything new. You weren't going to all of a sudden be branching open in a new path or breaking down a wall and finding something that you didn't know was there.
Right. So, the flip side of that is that this is a kind of post-apocalyptic world. It is empty because, the story says it should be fairly empty, but it's still. Just want to point out to people from a gameplay perspective that exploring these is often not very rewarding. The best thing you're going to find is a new weapon, which you do need, so it is cool when you find them, but most weapons are either on the critical path or they're from side quests. So
right, just another reason to keep that guide open, so you're not scrawling over, pouring over a desolate field with nothing quite in it except for repetitive battles there to make sure you know where you're going to get what you need.
100%.
Jól karamoihi Ar jarug noisi Da galich dalfoy Malich freude as la der spoir Jo dat jora
So I think this is a good time to get into some kind of wrap-up thoughts and recommendations before we get into the spoilers, which is the meat of this game, talking about the story and stuff. So, Brian, who would you recommend Nier Replicant to? And if you have any other just kind of wrap-up summarizing thoughts.
Yeah, I think I'd recommend Nier Replicant to somebody who likes unique video game experiences, but someone who also has the patience to see it through. Mm-hmm. And that's not a criticism of a player. We all have our preferences, right? And I tend to be, I play JRPGs that are long and boring and kind of slog through things. And I kind of enjoy part of that as part of the process of playing games. If you're not patient with games that don't seem to respect your time, the first literal 20 hours of this game could be a frustrating experience, as it was for me too. But I do think that there's that reward there that is worth it. So if you're into good video game stories and video games that don't necessarily feel like anything else, save for Nier Automata, which if you've played it, I think this would be for you. I tend to be someone, especially now as I'm getting a little older, that much more values a game that, even if it might not be technically as good in big air quotes as other games, it offers me something unique and different and makes me think a little bit. That's kind of what I'm more into. And this game certainly checked a lot of those boxes for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this game is greater than the sum of its parts, like especially from a gameplay mechanical side of things. The story and the music do a lot of heavy lifting toward like putting this up into a game that I am recommending to most people. It's interesting how, when I itemize it the way I do on the show, and I talk about the combat and I talk about the level design and I talk about designed tedium, which I do, again, think that's part of this. Yeah. All of those are things that I'm not like, the combat's fine. It's okay. The levels are empty. It's not fun to explore. You're going to go to the same levels that are empty and not fun to explore 25 to 30 times. Those are all negatives, but the story and the music are so good. Yep. And the way that they tie that tedium back into what the game is trying to say, I think is genius in a way. And I do recommend it, like you said, to anybody who wants a unique video game experience, a story that's told in a way that a video game is the best medium to tell this story the way they want to tell this story. If you value that, similar to Before Your Eyes, like we did before, play this. It's very good. And then it should go without saying, if you played Automata and liked it, but haven't played this one, you got to play this because there are tie-ins.
Yep.
And even though the tie-ins are minor, I think they are there. And I have a very strong feeling that the reason you loved Nier Automata is also in this game. Yeah. Unless you loved it because of 2B. Well, Kaine's in this game, so never mind. No excuse. So yeah, a pretty easy recommendation to a lot of people there. Yes. It's just, if you are going to get really mad by repeating the same stuff over and over again, that's part of this game. There's no getting around it. So little housekeeping before spoilers. Brian, where can people find Kane and Rince and Character Issues besides the usual places? You guys got anything else other than your favorite podcast app, basically?
We're basically on everything, I think, at this point. And you can as long as Twitter's still standing, you can find us there. And we're always putting out new themes. We just put out we put out calls to our listeners for character recommendations and everything there at Issues Character on Twitter. And then I'm at BrianTendo64, and Kane and Rince is at Kane and Rince. And the new volume, we're recording it now. First episode of the year just went live for everybody. And if you're on the Patreon there, you can get those episodes early and with more bloviating by people like me. So, but yeah, that's where you can get us.
Yeah. And so I'll reiterate what I said at the beginning, that Kane and Rince is one of the big inspirations for this show. I think it's an excellent podcast. Well worth the Patreon money that I give. Awesome show. And then Character Issues is a nice place for you and Leah and Rich to let loose a little bit. Talk about how much Chadley's a piece of shit, because those conversations just don't quite.
He's
go on Kane and Rince, do they?
He's a no. I mean, I don't know if Leon would let me get away with saying that Chadley's a real son of a bitch on the Kane and Rince podcast.
Right.
But we get into that on character issues. I'll have you know.
Yes. So both very entertaining shows in their own right. Heavy recommendations. Check down in the show notes for links. Or while I'm talking about Tales from the Backlog here, just tune me out. It's the same thing I said last week. Go search Kane and Rince in character issues. So for Tales from the Backlog, I think it would be really swell of you, listener, if you left a rating and review on your favorite podcasting app, as long as that app is Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Podcast Addict, because the other apps don't let you do that. But that would be very helpful. I have a Discord server with lots of cool people. There are lots of people who've played Nier Replicant, so this would be a good week to jump in and start talking about it with us. That'll be a good time. I also have a Patreon page for this show and for a Top 3 podcast. If that's a way that you would like to support, I appreciate everybody who does. And even if you don't, I still love you anyway. So the other thing is a Top 3 podcast, which is my other show where we do top 3 lists. And that show, I think, is a pretty good time. You should check that out if you want to hear me talk about things that are not video games. So Brian and I are going to take a break. And when we come back, the spoiler gloves come off for Nier Replicant. All right, I'm back with Brian, and we're talking about spoilers for Nier Replicant, and we're going to talk about the stuff before the time skip here. We already talked about Kaine and Emil and Grimoire Weiss and the sealed verses and stuff. I actually don't think that those are getting the sealed verses is not the most interesting part of the game, although there are some points that I want to just kind of go through, maybe lightning round style, of interesting stuff that I saw or was pointed out to me. So the first thing is that I want to know if you caught this when you were playing, either the first time or when you were doing Route E. Did you catch... Oh, by the way, people, when I say spoilers, I mean real spoilers. We're not going chronological through the order of spoilers that you get. So if you haven't played, get out.
Yeah,
we're going to spoil everything now.
We might spoil Route E in the next 2 minutes, so yes.
Okay. So there's your warning. Get out. And action. So, Brian, did it mean anything to you that the shades in the plains outside of the village drop school books?
So it didn't until I read your sentence earlier today, and I went back in, and they absolutely do drop school books.
Yep.
Those are kids.
Yes, they are.
Those are kids. Those are kids that would not attack you if you did not attack them. They are, and you are borderline encouraged to slaughter when you've heard, there's there's more shades. There's shades everywhere. It's like, oh yeah, well yeah, there they are. I'll kill them. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of how it's all set up. It's crazy. But yes.
So did you notice that they were passive too, or was that also something you saw after seeing this?
Not until I read this. I loaded it back up specifically to do that. Yeah. Wild. Absolutely wild.
Me either. I didn't notice this until it was pointed out to me by my good friend Rick Firestone on his podcast. So this, I was gung-ho about killing these shades when you go out in the plains, and Nier says, oh, there's shades close to the village. And I'm like, shades close to the village? We can't have that.
Grab your pitchforks. Exactly. Yeah.
So you don't find out that they're humans, let alone children, for a long, long time, but really sucks once you know that.
Yeah, that revelation, not just the specific one about the kids, which I didn't have until I read the notes for the show, but that revelation of what you've been doing, and then how they extrapolate upon that, sometimes in like the most painful ways, during playthroughs B and C is heartbreaking. Yes, absolutely heartbreaking.
Yes, it is, and it's heartbreaking, but not surprising that my video game mentality, my gamer mentality took me right to violence as soon as I saw these things. Even though, like you said, or like was pointed out to me, they don't attack you when they see you. They don't really care. They're kind of curious, actually.
Yeah.
And then when you start swinging, then they attack. They fight back, but not until you initiate.
Yeah. That reminds me a lot of the this is a revelation it gives to you later on in the game of the wolves. Or like the wolves section. That it's that same theme of just being like, we're just defending ourselves. Just leave us alone. Like, oh, you monsters. And, you know, like the whole, you know, the Walking Dead, like the humans are the real monsters. Like, that's a trope. I get it. But in the way that information is presented to you in this game was something else.
I think that it is a trope, but it's one that video games have started to tap into in like the last 10 years or so. And at least in games that I've played. And I think that video games are in a unique situation to pull this off better than other media can, because I'm the one choosing to do those terrible deeds.
Yep.
And then it's revealed to me what I've been doing, and I have to think back on my actions, not some character in a show doing the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
it puts you right in the driver's seat of what did I do? Regret.
Oh, and this game has so many dear God, what have I done moments. And I didn't talk about this in the non-spoiler part, even though the notes were there. I skipped it because this game has a huge kind of commentary or through line of Nier and you as the player acting without complete information and feeling like you're doing the right thing all the way to the end, even after you get the information that was missing, because you still feel like you're doing the right thing. And so it makes it even harder on playthrough E when you come back to this at the beginning. You know what's going on, but you still have to go through with all that stuff. Yeah.
And in playthrough E, and just so I know and I'm 99% sure I'm correct, that was the playthrough that's not in the original game, correct?
Yes.
Playthrough E, yes. Okay. So yeah, putting you even in those shoes then to go back to Kid Nier and to go back to doing all those things again, like really, I mean, just the most ignorant version of you in the game. It's just something. It really hammers that home. In a very complete and satisfying way, but also like gut wrenching in some cases.
We're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. Because I did want to talk about that. And these are late game revelations that are recontextualizing the beginning of the game. So at the beginning, you are playing as Kid Nier still. And I did want to just kind of rapid fire through some of our favorite parts at the beginning. So I'll let you go first.
I think my favorite parts of the beginning of the game are just kind of that initial brush with Kaine, fighting Kaine, finding out what Kaine was about, and then all of a sudden having her becoming a bit of a reluctant party member. I found those sections to be really effective. Her shunning by the entire Aerie and literally them never physically representing who the Aerie people are in the game until much, much later. They're just kind of like, you kind of see them as they're almost like all hermits not coming out of their huts, go way outside, or like you feel that like very rarely in games, aside from just like hostile enemies, like you get environments where you're just like, I am not welcome here. Like I am traipsing upon somebody else's beliefs or just their, like just an invasion of privacy in a certain way. That feeling of being an outsider in that village, was good. I mean, effective.
Yeah. Did, I wonder if you caught this, because I did some research. I've talked to people about this. This goes along the lines of Kaine and her shunning by the people there and her backstory that you get at the beginning of Route B, I believe. Kaine, the reason they shun her is because, as far as I understand, is because she's intersex.
Yes.
And I missed if the game explicitly says this or if it's like strongly hinted at or if it's just because I read it on Wikipedia.
I think even calling it hinted at is a bit, that's giving the game too much credit. It's very veiled. They basically, the terms, I might be misquoting, but I believe the terms are just different. You know what I mean? Like she's just different than everybody else. So she's not welcome. She's not this. She's not that.
I wonder if that's a translation, changing of words or terminology from Japanese to English. I have no idea, just a conjecture. But anyway, I like what you said about how they treat her and how they treat you, because you're just there. You just want to ask for help, and they're just like, no, I think they say like, you'll be the death of us. And I'm like, me, what am I doing in here? So going to the area in general, like I said earlier, the visuals, the music, and then the people are so shut in that it's a really memorable part. I had another part here, Emil's Mansion. I said there were a couple of visually striking places in the game. When you go up to Emil's Mansion and the whole game goes black and white, I was like, what the hell's going on here? And then it's like a survival horror level almost.
Yeah, it turns black and white. All of a sudden, there's tarantulas the size of you running around the outside gates, and that was you get the sense that you're in a haunted place almost instantly. You get that basically the spooky butler separates you from your friends. Like it does kind of turn into that for a moment until you kind of realize or kind of become aware of what's actually happening there.
Yeah. The loading screens start during this route describing Project Gestalt. And I only knew that word because I knew that the original version of the game was called Nier Gestalt.
Yep.
But that meant nothing to me. I mean, other than the actual meaning of the word Gestalt. But when did you pick up on any of the, the fact that the shades are humans and that they've been separated from their, shells? Did you pick up on any of that before it was told to you?
No, not really.
Me either.
I had like inklings that there was more going on than I knew, but that's informed from my playthrough of Automata. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I think that in a vacuum, no, I really didn't.
Okay.
I knew something was up, but I didn't know to what extent and where that was kind of going.
Yeah.
I think that becomes that revelation, and then that subsequent playthrough is just kind of like that oh shit moment, like wow, and there's so many moments I could talk about, and I won't talk about all of them, I promise you, but there's, and I, you know what, and I'm already getting ahead of myself, so let's finish with the stuff before this.
No worries.
So yeah.
The other thing that I wanted to talk about is one of the things I love about Nier Automata is how they change up the gameplay from section to section. And this game does that a little bit. And one of the big ways it does that is it introduces these text adventure sections. Yeah. And there are several of them throughout the game. What did you think?
I didn't like these as much as a lot of other people do. I am, without making myself sound like too impatient or too like, what's the word I'm looking for? Ignorant, maybe. I found myself getting lost in the flowery language of those and not really appreciating some of the stories. I read them all through evenly and got through them the first time. And then I found that if I would misanswer one of the prompts and not be able to progress, and like the tree in the forest would be like, no, this is going wrong. And then it spits you out of the tree. That frustrated me, on a lot of levels. I do like a good text adventure. I thought it was interesting. I didn't realize they were going to go on as long as they would. So that I was kind of spamming the text originally, because that's what I kind of do. I'm kind of programmed to do that, and then found myself kind of skipping key moments. So not my favorite parts, but I do think that it's really interesting. It's like, it's a swing. You know what I mean? It's a wild swing, a wild departure from what you've been doing up to that point.
Yeah. And sometimes I wonder, video games are really hard to make, and it's really hard to put everything you want in the game. So I wonder if these were always meant to be text adventures, or if there are things they didn't have time to make and then they turned them into text adventures. But I liked them. I thought the writing was fun. I enjoyed reading them. And the thing that I think really helped is that the music in the background matches what you're reading emotionally.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool. Some of them are less text adventure. Like, when I say text adventure, I don't mean, like old computer game text adventures. It's just kind of a term. You're reading, and then sometimes they'll ask you a question and you have to have paid attention to answer it correctly. In these ones in the forest. Some of them later, when you're learning about Kaine's backstory, are literally just visual novel. You just
Yeah.
read them, and that's it. But I thought the writing was good enough. And then when we got to the stuff with Kaine, that was actually interesting because it's about Kaine's backstory, and I care about that, so I wanted to learn.
Yeah, that was the one, or maybe the two. There's a sequence of them, I guess. But when telling the story about her and her grandmother and the painting of the painting and everything else, and then you can go back to Kaine's hut and see that painting. Like there's stuff there that really fleshes out her character, gives context to the things that you've already seen, gives specific context, to the shade that attacked her grandmother and kind of absorbed her grandmother, and
why she's so fucking mad at it. All
exactly.
The time.
Yeah. Why she's pissed that you're going to kill it because she wants to kill it, you know?
Yeah.
Those were very effective. Again, I think for me, the difference was, and again, I'm not trying to paint myself as some dumb idiot who can't sit down and enjoy it. It was a bit too much of a screeching halt for me, but I appreciated what they were trying to pull off.
Mm-hmm. Right on. So I think that, do you have any other like real memorable moments from the young Nier portion of the game?
So the only other thing, and I messaged you about it, was the old lady in the lighthouse quest.
Oh yeah.
So there's this whole side story there, and I know you didn't do it, where you're taking letters from her to like her long lost love, basically back and forth to the postman, and you uncover that the entire town wants that lady to run the lighthouse. Her love died in a boating accident like 30 years ago, but the town has been writing these letters and sending them to her, and like fake, like basically are keeping her hope alive so that she stays alive, because she's running this lighthouse to kind of like, you know, bring her lost love home, but he's never coming home. And then at the end, when she's dying, she tells you, I kind of always knew they were doing this, but I didn't want to disappoint them, so I played along. So the reason she was this old crotchety woman was because she didn't want to disappoint the villagers, because she thought it was so nice that they were pretending that her love was alive. It was like this, like, if I didn't just keep doing like back to the post office, back to her, back to the get her mail, I never would have experienced this. And there's this whole tragic gifts of the Magi type situation between them, where she's like, we can't stop writing these letters, and she's like, well, I can't stop acting like this old crone or else they'll stop writing me letters. Oh, it was just one of those moments I was like, holy shit, this game has layers.
Yeah.
But
that's impressive.
But
I didn't know that the quest continued. Like I guess I never went back and talked to her, so I didn't even know that was an issue.
It's one of those things that, like, you talk to Devila in the tavern. She's like, I hear there's an old lady in the seafront who's not getting her mail. And Grimoire Vice is like, not her again, you know, and all that. And, but yeah, it was one of those things that I was like, oh, I couldn't believe it was there. And like, it was a really cool moment. Really cool moment.
Yeah. That is one nice thing I'll say about the side quests, is that they may be tedious, like mechanically, but not all of them, but some of them have stories that I think are worth experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even if the things that you're doing during those are not interesting in the slightest.
Right.
So
yeah.
The end of the young Nier section, we get all the sealed verses. We think that everything's good, but shades attack the village and invade the library, which is, God, if I've been up those stairs in the library too many times.
Yeah, I've never run down them. I do a double jump flip over the railing to get back down to the front.
Of course, yeah. So you go in the library, you have a fight in there. Nier gets hurt, like badly hurt, and the Shadow Lord shows up. Did you clock who the Shadow Lord was, or who the Shadow Lord looked like at this time?
Yeah, I kind of felt that was the first moment that I thought back to the Nier and Yona from the grocery store.
Yeah.
And I was thinking like, oh, okay, like I'm part of some other process here. Like I didn't go full on and be like, I'm the Shadow Lord. It was more of like, there is something else at work. There was this 1,400 some odd years passed, and I still look the same. It clearly can't still be me. And then now I see this kind of ghost, like almost like badass cool version of me. Like, I don't know. There was something there. I didn't put all the pieces together, but there were a lot of pieces I didn't know existed yet. But
Yeah, there was so what happened with me was I when you start this section and you realize that they look the same or they are the same or whatever, but something's not right. But then I forgot because then you're playing the game and you're going through the story.
Yeah.
And then I saw this and I kind of like you, I was like, oh, right. There was that thing like over 1,000 years ago. And so I wrote in my notes that this was an evil Nier that you're fighting. So he kidnaps Yona. You lose the fight. I thought this was going to be the end of the game when I was first playing. So not even close to the end of the game. But you lose. He escapes. There's a shade loose in the basement. You locked it down there. For some reason, you can't kill it. I'm not sure why, but the solution they come to is Emil has the power to petrify things by looking at them. So he always wears a blindfold, basically. And then the idea is to petrify Kaine when she's standing in front of the door so that she turns into a Kaine Han Solo in carbonite and seals the shade down in the basement. And so that's what you do. And then fades to black. And then 5 years later, Nier is a fully grown anime protagonist.
Yes.
He really filled out. And
yes, he did.
he's just been back in the village doing tasks, being mad about what happened, killing shades. He didn't like break bad, but he's definitely not the sweet, innocent, maybe innocent's the wrong word, naive kid that he used to be.
Yeah, he's kind of evolved into like a hunter, right? He's basically like the fixer, the hunter, the hitman for hire of shades, as it were. And then he has kind of made his name for himself over that previous 5 years of just, he hasn't really made much progress searching for Yona. Grimoire Vice still hanging around with him, but yeah, he's just kind of essentially killing every shade he can to try to get to the Shadow Lord, and not making a whole heck of a lot of progress in doing so.
Right, exactly. So Emil comes, he says that he thinks he knows how to cure petrification, which Kaine's still there 5 years later. So you go to this science lab basically under Emil's mansion, and you learn Emil's backstory, which I think is tragic. And I think we can just kind of run through the whole backstory, even the stuff we learn at the end here. So I'm not totally positive what their role is in Project Gestalt, but I am sure of their roles as like weapons, living weapons, basically. Are you with me there, or do you know?
Yep, 100%. Yep.
Okay. So Emil's sister is subject number 7, a test subject. She is the ultimate weapon, which basically made into a living nuclear bomb. Just think of it that way. Yep. And Emil is her brother, and Emil has this power of petrification. And at some point, his sister breaks loose, basically, down there. And he has to go down and petrify his own sister. And this is told in another text visual novel section later in the game. And there's this scene where they talk about this. You learned that this happened. There's a scene where Emil has his birthday late in the game. And that was one of the most emotionally affecting things that happened in the game, because Emil has been through, at this point in the story, the things that you've seen, he's been through so much. He's about to lose his body in the story that we're going chronologically. But then we go back and he's this sweet little kid just having his birthday, and he has the same shitty food he eats every day, but it's his birthday. It's special because the nurse he likes gives it to him. He's just so sweet. And then we go to the part where he has to basically kill his own sister. So just the worst for Emil.
Yeah. He kind of has basically been told, or has found out, that his sister is going to go, maybe not rogue. It's hard to describe unless you see it. And even then it's kind of hard to parse out, but he's the only creature, the only thing that can stop her. And so Emil's kind of tasked with this like unsolvable problem that he can only solve by killing his sister. And in doing so affects everything that happens to him afterwards. From that point on, it's kind of the, like, how much can Emil go through, like, show. And he becomes this he's both the problem and the solution for everything. And all of his actions seem to have dire personal consequences, but yet he still commits these acts and still does these things for the greater good of the ones that he loves. He doesn't want his sister in pain and doesn't want his sister to suffer. He doesn't want Kaine in pain. He doesn't want Nier in pain. He doesn't want them to die when fighting an unbeatable creature. He's kind of that, like, always sacrificing himself for the greater good, while continuing to soldier on in what becomes a persistently disintegrating form. He goes from boy to floating skeleton, like, monster with a mask that is still this sweet little boy, but not physically represented that way at all anymore.
Yeah. He's, so, like, yada, 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 you unpetrify Kaine, and the villagers are freaked out by Emil. They will not let him in the village.
Yeah.
And they won't let Kaine in the village either, because they know what she is. So, yeah, Emil loses his body. He becomes this terrible just skeleton with, like we said, the mask that Yoko Taro wears. It's really hard to describe that mask with just words. Google Yoko Taro and you'll know what we're talking about. Yeah. And then, like you said, later in the game, we go through at least two situations where Emil's power is the only thing that can save you, and then it's just horrible guilt for Emil at what he's done. And through all of this, he's a little kid dealing with this.
Yep.
But it also presents him with some very good conversations with Kaine when Kaine is doubting herself, or when Nier is doubting himself. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is you're in the shrine, and Kaine dies for the first of many times. She gets impaled by something too often, I think.
Yeah, no, it becomes it becomes laughable at some point how often, like, Kaine always has some sharp implement piercing her abdomen, and she falls to the ground. And each time I was semi-tricked into thinking, this is it. That she's no way. And the next thing you know, Emil's cradling her head and she's coming to. It's like, it happens a lot.
Yeah. So in this particular one, this one stands out to me because Kaine has been possessed by a shade. We learned some point through her story that she's half human, half shade, which really means she's being possessed by a shade. Not that, her mother was a shade and her father was a replicant, but
yeah, exactly.
human shade. But her shade half takes over in this part. You have to fight her. You fight her, and then at the end, she basically says, like, I'm pushing you all away from me now because I'm too dangerous to you. And Emil, like, lays into her and says, like, you helped me accept myself. I'm going to help you accept yourself. Like, I'm okay to accept who I am because of you. You are the reason I'm okay with this. So you're not leaving us. And it's a really impassioned and affecting speech. I'm not doing it the way he does, but I'm getting chills thinking about the way he does.
And it really shows how those characters feed off of each other, because Kaine is this, like, over-sexualized, very beautiful, strong woman, right? And Emil is this, like, constantly becoming aesthetically less pleasing, failing physical form, but has the emotional strength that Kaine lacks. So, like, they play off each other in such a way that you're not quite sure that one is really whole without the other, and vice versa. In no romantic sense at all, obviously. He's a child, and she is someone who really doesn't seem to want to be involved with anybody ever, except for maybe there's some allusions to that at the end, but whatever. And like they kind of become two halves of a whole person in a lot of ways, and they both possess qualities that the others covet for a number of reasons, and that continues to be effective throughout the entirety of their relationship from that point on. And when they speak, and when something happens to one and the other reacts, like, it just kind of, it hits you in the gut. It's just like they're intrinsically connected forever, from all the things they've both been through, both with each other and removed from each other. They've drawn a beautiful pair there in a lot of ways.
Yeah, 100%. And so Emil is in the support role in this part, and then immediately after that, you go to the Eyrie, or I don't know, a couple of quests later, you go to the Eyrie, and Emil's yada yada yada. You fight a big shade. It's kind of cool actually. You're tricked by the villagers. They're trying to kill you by tricking you to come there. They're taking on your form because, as we learn, they are shades.
Yep.
The reason they think you're going to kill them all is because you are going to kill them all. They know that they're not safe around you. So they trick you. They try to kill you. It doesn't work. Emil's magic wakes up and he basically nukes this entire place, kills everything.
Yes. Yeah.
And he can't deal with this. Like, he is distraught after this.
Yeah. He uses his power to save his friends, but in turn just eliminates an entire village off the map. And this scene afterwards, when I think I messaged you, they said, like, Emil just turned into a nuke. Like, he became a megaton bomb that was dropped on this village, and you cannot go back there anymore. Like, there is nothing it is decimated, destroyed to rubble. And now this kid who has already been through all of the things that you so eloquently described a few minutes ago, and now has to deal with the weight of essentially being a mass murderer.
Yeah.
With altruistic intentions. However, he has the weight now that Nier, through his ignorance, has never had to feel. He's always been fighting for justice, right? He's killing all these shades and doing all these things, but Emil has just been trying to be the best friend, brother, companion, and it just hits it. That was a moment for me that when Emil is dealing with that, he's kind of shaking, head hung. They're trying to kind of coax him back into consciousness, and it just that you just feel so much for this, what is essentially an aesthetically ridiculous character, right? He's this floating giant's head with this big, almost gruesome smile on his face and these skeletal arms, and he just kind of floats around, and it's like, there's nothing whimsical about that moment. And to read emotion from a character that can literally emote none that's a pretty big accomplishment for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Big shout out to the voice acting.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we are going to go to Shadow Lord's castle and just talk about this. We're going to revisit this several times throughout the game, but you get to Shadow Lord's castle. Devil and Popola are there, and they're trying to keep you out. And it's initially a mystery why they're trying to keep you out. And for a while, they do the whole thing where they're like, we can't tell you why, but you can't come in. Stuff like that. You have to fight them to get past them. Now, I recognize Devil and Popola from Nier Automata, where I guess I won't spoil what happens with them, but they're there, and their story is, their resolution to their story is affecting, I think, in that game. But it would be so much more affecting knowing their story from this game. And the reason why they're in the position that they're in Automata is because of this part right here. So Devil and Popola are trying to keep you out because they have a mission, basically, and they kind of tell you what we've talked about before. All the humans died, and what you're a replicant, an android of sorts, and all the shades are the remnants of the humans. They're called Gestalts, from this project Gestalt to keep humanity alive, even though it's being decimated by the Black Skrull. And they're out in the world in this shade form, hopefully one day going to return to their shell, basically, and become whole again, is how I understood it.
Yep.
So I kind of wondered at this point, like, is this why the shades are attacking me? Because I'm a shell and they can, like, do they have this drive to become whole again?
Right, yeah.
But as we play longer, I realized, no, they're attacking me because I'm attacking them, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
So
you have become the main threat to humanity at that point.
Yes. And Devil and Popola are trying to preserve humanity by allowing this project to be seen through to the end. And this is something that I don't totally understand, because later, I think it's in Route C, something like that, they talk about how they want to kill Shadow Lord, or maybe they're talking about trying to keep him in check. I'm not totally sure. Is that what it is?
I don't know. I wasn't coming here hoping for you to clarify. I actually somewhat feel relieved that I couldn't suss it out on my own.
Yeah.
No, it seems to be kind of pulling at two sides, right? They're there to preserve. They don't want you to kill the Shadow Lord. And then as you progress further, they seem to be kind of becoming more, I don't say they're not allowing you. They certainly provide resistance, but they do have a plan, it seems, in place to either usurp the Shadow Lord or to somehow kill him and bring this project to a close in some way. What that would accomplish, I do not know. I'm unaware of that.
So their motivations there are a little unclear to me. Like, they're trying to keep you alive, and we do get context on this in Route B and C, where you see them talking to each other and kind of planning, like, we need to kill this thing because it's a threat to Nier and Yona. And we need them alive because they're the shells for the Shadow Lord and Yona.
Yeah.
So we need them to get there. But I think maybe they're trying to stop you now because you're just on this war path.
Yeah. They might believe that you're actually threatening the project now because you may have become strong enough to actually follow through on your actions and kill the Shadow Lord and to end this thing and to not become that shell that is necessary for the passing on of those. Yeah.
Now, knowing now that the shades are the remnants of humanity and that we've been killing them throughout the game, one of my kind of criticisms of this story is that our characters never really have to reckon with this because you don't continue the game, you repeat the game. So you find this out and then like a half hour later, you fight Shadow Lord and the game's over. You see the credits and then you restart. So you know this in your head. So it's great. It recontextualizes it for you, but it would have been interesting to see them deal with this as characters the way that it happens in the sequel. Won't say any more than that.
Right. Yeah. No, they really don't. Like Nier and Vice don't really ever have to, not that they would ever atone, but necessarily deal with the emotional ramifications of what they've been doing. Like that 5, I mean, cause you get the impression, and you didn't play through the 5-year skip, but you get the impression that during the time they were just straight up running through shades. I mean, he was like shade killer number 1, just mowing down, these remnants of humanity, which we now know are remnants of humanity. But Nier never really has to deal with that. Neither does Vice. They have to deal with their own struggles along the way. And sacrifices get made up going to the Shadow Lord, and Grimoire Vice is kind of one of those pieces. He gets kind of taken from you and supposedly fades from existence or merges with Grimoire Noir and all those things. But yeah, they never are forced to kind of reconcile their actions.
Mm-hmm. So I guess it's possible that Nier doesn't reckon with this because he's just, tunnel vision. This does not affect his goal to get to Yona. So I'm just not going to deal with this because Yona's behind that door.
And I think that's a big part of it that you just hit on. I think that at this point, 5 years of this, that if you straight out told him, hey, everything you're killing is a living soul, is a living being, has a potential future, he'll be like, oh, cool. They still took Yona.
Yeah.
And I don't care anymore. Like I will slaughter whatever I need to do to make sure she's safe. And I think he had that's become that sole motivation, like you said, the tunnel vision that it doesn't, and I can't say for certain because you don't really see, but I'm not sure if at that point that would have mattered to him as much as saving his sister.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you fight Devla and Popola. I have more to say on this, but I'll get in it in Route B as we get some more revelations. You fight Devla and Popola. Devla, challenges you, even though I think it's pretty clear they're not going to kill you, but I think it's like a last ditch thing. Devla challenges you, you kill Devla. Popola freaks out. She gets killed too, but before she does, she starts to call some insane spell. I don't know what's going on. It's bad news. And Emil, again, for his friends, sacrifices himself to get Kaine and Nier to safety. And this is a scene that every time I saw it, I was affected by it, and they keep giving you new stuff in this scene where Emil is sacrificing himself, and it continues to be affecting, even though you're seeing it for the third time later.
Yeah, and once again with Emil, he's had the revelation at the area that he has this power and this is what he's capable of. But in that moment, he's making that choice, having that knowledge, knowing what's going to happen. But he firmly believes that he's doing it now for the right reasons, because he's taking out one aggressive act. When he's doing this, he's not leveling a town full of innocent people. He's just taking away this one aggressor, and knowing how painful it's going to be, knowing what's going to stir up in him, knowing how much energy he's going to have to expend to do this, and potentially die in the process, still willingly makes that choice. It says a lot about that character. It says a lot about. And a lot about the fact that I'm even thinking about these things, the steps they've gone to make sure that I know all of this about that character, and can properly appreciate that when getting to that moment.
Yeah. So I had written down here, this is why everyone freaked out when they saw Emil in Nier Automata. Everyone who had played this game, I get it. Because I had played Automata and seen Emil and been like, I don't like the song that's playing when he's here. He seems kind of goofy. Yeah. I don't really know what the big deal is. Now I get it. So
100%.
I don't know if they outright tell you, but you should figure out by now that Yona is housing the soul of the prologue Yona, or maybe has already been reunited. I wasn't totally sure, or they're prepping her to be reunited. And then our Nier is the shell for the Shadow Lord, who is the prologue Nier. And that's the end of Route A, and then you start over again. You start over with going to unpetrify Kaine, basically.
Yes, yeah. You basically start fighting that monster that's been trapped under the library for the last 5 years. It's like kind of the re-launching point.
Yeah. So we get a little text adventure telling Kaine's backstory, how she was raised by her grandma. There was a scene when she's fighting that shade in the area where the shade impersonates her grandma. And Kaine basically says, shut the fuck up. My grandma doesn't talk like that. I'm going to rip out your eyeballs and piss in the sockets.
Yep.
And so we get backstory here. And then we also learn about the shade that is inhabiting her. So Kaine was mortally injured. The shade basically, healed her, but is now controlling her body, but just like you get the feeling.
Became his host, right? Like she's like, he can't survive without her, kind of, and he seems to feed off her pain and anguish and anger. So she's a very appropriate host for him, and in the process, she gets to continue living.
Right, and the shade, his name is Tyrion. I'm going to call him. Tells Kaine that if she stops killing things, then he's going to take over, and so that's kind of part of Kaine's motivation for being on the warpath. You hear his voice through Route B. I don't like the voice that much, but what are you going to do?
Yeah, it's kind of that, like that real, like, slimy, I'm gonna, it gets the point across. I didn't think that it was, their dialogue wasn't necessarily as affecting as some of the other dialogue that gets added, and a lot of the other dialogue that gets added is just in the form of text. But yeah, it was interesting to know though why Kaine was so angry all the time. It definitely, and also it really gives flavor. Like her grandmother was a foul-mouthed woman, so it explains a lot of Kaine's kind of use of that language. It's something she comes by honestly, because I think, especially these days, and this game did come out in 2021, but it was a remake of an older game. But during that Xbox 360 PS3 era, like using vulgarity in games still felt like just kind of like I can't believe they actually said that. They put that in a video game, thing. And so you weren't sure if they were just pushing the envelope for pushing the envelope's sake, but to give that a story, a contextual meaning and purpose, it made a lot of sense, and it made things fit a little bit better.
Yeah, and I felt like the benefit of this, although I think it's just a coincidence now, is that as you're going through Route B, you can understand the shades a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so Route B's purpose, now that you know that they're the last remnants of humanity, is to humanize them as you go through all the scenarios that you went through, killing the big knight in the Lost Shrine, just trying to protect his friends, and you see them talking about it. The big robot you fight in the junk heap is just trying to protect a shade whose mother was killed by, I think the brothers there, or soldiers or something like that. And a bunch of stuff like this. So that's like the whole purpose of Route B. One thing that I got hung up on in Route B is that Kaine could understand shades the whole time because she's part shade. She never says anything. She's just, she says, I don't think this is what it seems. Or she says, hey, something's not right here, but never really elaborates. And Nier always says, no, we're doing this. But in my opinion, Kaine is not the type of personality to just be shut down by someone else if she has something to say. So this was one other thing here. Again, our characters never deal with this themselves because Kaine never says anything.
Yeah. And part of me, so I struggle with that a little bit too. And I think the way that I've justified it in my head is that Kaine is being told by this shade that she needs to keep killing in order to survive. She taking part in these kind of like these battles with Nier allows her to do that, which ensures her survival and those types of things. And so I think it might be a self-preservation thing, which is maybe why she's so self-loathing, especially in those kind of tender moments with Emil, like where she really obviously hates herself in a lot of ways, and there's reasons for that. So that's how I justified it in my head, but it does seem weird, because the Kaine at her heart, the one that you learn to know and grow to like you would think that she would be like, no, stop, this is not a monster riding a monstrous robot. This is a kid that's lost his mother, and now you're not only killing the kid's protector, but you're killing the kid. That's the one that killed me. I got a soft spot for the Iron Giant anyway. So that was the one out of all of those that really just gutted me, because it's just the kid's mom was killed and it befriends this big doofus robot and they just pale around in the junk heap. I'm just like, oh my God, that killed me. Absolutely killed me.
Yeah. And I remember in Route A, the first time I did that, the joy that I killed that shade with after I beat the robot. Because it tries to fight back, but it can't. And you've had it, displayed, but you can't hurt the shade. You have to kill the robot first. So finally you kill the robot and you just destroy that shade. Well, it was just a sweet little kid that found a protector in the factory. And you, as you do everywhere you go in this game, you came in and you fucked it all up.
Yeah, it was one of those moments when you finally knock that robot out on the shades there. It's like, well, finally I can get you now, you bastard. You know what I mean? Even up there, I haven't been able to touch you, and now I can just kind of put finishing touches on, and then it's again another juxtaposition they use, a flipping of, without actually changing what you do, just flipping that perception based on knowledge they've introduced to you. It's so elegantly done, and it just isn't. Normally when games try to do that, and I'm struggling to think of an example, I've been trying to think for a while, and I can't come up with one, of course. I'll think of it the minute we stop recording. But they're so ham-fisted, or beating you over the head with metaphor, and just not allowing you to, embrace the nuance of the moment. And this is just the opposite of that. It doesn't even let you embrace it. It makes you wallow in it. And it's just effective. It's just really, really well done.
Yeah, there are a couple other games that I think do this pretty well, but I feel like saying them now is going to spoil the whole point of those games, so maybe I'll tell you when we're done or something like that. So the one character that does say something is when you go to the Aerie and they're taking a outwardly human form, right? They're tricking you. They want to try to kill you once and for all. Emil says that he thinks that they're humans. while you're fighting, he says something like, wait, I think they're all humans. And Vice is like, nope, they're shades. We're killing all of them. So
Yep.
that started to make me doubt Vice a little bit about what his motivations are. And I never got a clear answer for that, but just a little seed of doubt, right?
Yeah, a little seed of doubt there. And I think it also, like, it puts more light on the fact that Vice, while thinking he knows everything, in a lot of cases, his intellectual capacity is more of his shield for his ignorance in a lot of ways. And, and I think that kind of reveals that he's always been that voice, right, of reason for you, that driving hand, the guiding hand, and to then learn that he really doesn't have a grasp of what's going on, despite him so confidently stating over and over again that he does, is an interesting flip of roles there.
Yeah. So on to the end again. You fight the Shadow Lord, same as you did before.
Sure did.
Except, this time the Shadow Lord apologizes to Yona for not protecting her. You see the original version of them from the prologue for a little bit. And then, the prologue, Nier and Yona are reunited. And then it goes back again. You start over again. And the purpose of Route C, I think, is to show you Devla and Popola's behind-the-scenes maneuvering to make sure that you get to that point at the end alive. Now, and then I think they fight you at the end because they realize how dangerous you've become.
Yeah.
But they have done all kinds of things to make sure you find the sealed verses, to find those key fragments or whatever. There's a quote from them where they say, if he can't find it, the past 5 years will be for nothing. When you get to the castle, they say they can't let you kill the Shadow Lord or the plan will collapse. So they've been maneuvering here. And that was my big takeaway from Route C, other than the choice at the end.
Yeah, so I found Route C to be much less effective for me than Route B. Not that I didn't care about what Devil and Popola were doing, but I feel like the revelations were a little less impactful. You know, I felt like I already kind of knew what was going on, but at that point I was pot committed. Like I'm seeing this thing through to find out every ounce of the why behind what happened. And I still think, like, we kind of talked about this with Route A, like their motivations and their kind of master plan is not apparent, and they never really tell you, and you kind of kill them before you really know what you're stopping or preventing from happening. And that is a little, I don't want to say, it's not frustrating, because I think they pulled off some pretty amazing stuff to get you there to begin with, but it's not as clear as, say, the intent of Route B.
I wonder if their intent is just to keep you from killing the Shadow Lord, and then also keep the Shadow Lord from getting too powerful or acting out in a way that would damage the plan. Because I don't know if the Shadow Lord is like in on the plan of Project Gestalt. I just think the Shadow Lord also has that drive of Yona to protect Yona.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
To the Shadow Lord, protecting Yona means taking our Yona, basically.
Yeah. And I think that, like, when he apologizes to Yona, and you kind of see this as you move forward, that, like, he might even come to a realization that by allowing you to win, you are now going to protect Yona. Like, it's not necessarily a failure on his part. Him in his form may not get to live on, but Yona will still have a protector. It's just for how long, I think, would be kind of the question there. So, and then, of course, then there's the ending of, well, I mean, it's not ending C. There's ending C and D there that we get to. And, the good news is, for the end of this one, with how this can go both ways, is we get to see a little taste of Emil not being actually dead. Yeah. You know, which is like a huge win at that point. Like, yes, you know, he ping pongs his head through the desert and a couple other things. Yeah.
That happened at the end of ending B. Emil's head falls down from the sky. And he says he needs to do something. And then, so he just rolls away, which was kind of funny, kind of cute, because it's Emil. Kind of sad, like you said, his physical condition has deteriorated from human boy to skeleton to head.
Yes.
So we wonder, what he's actually going to be able to do. But
Yeah.
we'll find out. At the end of this one, we get the short story about his birthday, crying emoji in the notes there.
Yeah.
And then Emil wakes up as the head again. So we know that there's more to Emil's story that we're going to see.
Yeah.
But the big thing is the choice at the end. So you fight the Shadow Lord, and then Tyrion takes over Kaine's body. And you have to fight that most difficult fight in the game for me.
Yep.
And then you have a choice. You can kill Kaine and set her free from all of this. Let me see. Yes. So you kill Kaine and set her free, and then you and Yona can be reunited. Or you can spare Kaine, but in order to do that, you're going to have to give up your own existence. So we'll stay with ending C, which is killing Kaine and setting her free. Did you do this one first, or did you choose to spare her first?
I only did this one first because I knew that ending D was going to be like the end of the game. Like, even though there's more to it, we'll talk about E in a minute, but I did C because C felt like the wrong thing to do. I knew where my save point was, and even though I was setting Kaine free, like, it was kind of like, yes, you can do the thing, kill Kaine. It is sort of selfless. She's going to be free of this error, but then you get to be with your sister. Like, hey, there you go. And then the clearly more selfless choice of sacrificing yourself for that felt like the more impactful one. So I did C first just to see it, and then followed up and did D.
I was going to ask, like, the better question I think would have been to ask you, had you not been following a guide like both of us were, which would you have done? So it sounds like you would have done D.
I think so. Yeah. That's and that, again, not to Nier Automata is a different show, but the very similar things in that regard as well. So ending C, you kill Kaine, you set her free. This is because Kaine has expressed her desire to die and be done with this for, like, especially at the end when you're fighting Shadow Lord and all of that stuff, that she wants nothing more than to die. So this is kind of granting her wish. But you have to kill Kaine, which you don't want to kill Kaine. She's your buddy. So you pick up Lunar Tear, you're reunited with Yona, and happy ending, right? Ending D, you spare Kaine, but you have to give up your own existence, which means in a game term, you delete your save files. Mm-hmm. You get this screen, this play out of everything being deleted, your menus and everything. I think you even have to type your name in for who you're going to delete, which is why I said in the non-spoiler part to use your own name, because it's just a little bit more fun than, Butt Lord or whatever you wrote in there. So. Yeah, exactly. It might take a little of the gravity away if, like, now type in your name for delete and you're just typing in ass face. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, okay,
the Pokemon route for naming your characters. So it deletes your save files, and then we have a very bittersweet ending here where Kaine and Yona talk. Yona thanks Kaine for saving her, but Kaine doesn't remember doing it. And she's pained by something, but she doesn't know why, which is a horrible state to be in. She gets a little memory of Nier, and she sees her Lunar Tear flower, and she thinks, this is very special to me now. I don't know why. We're just going to live with this pain for a while.
Yeah, the something is missing, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
This seemed to me, now I'm not trying to get too in the weeds, but this seems very much to me to be, intentional or not, like almost the way that I view Alzheimer's and dementia in a lot of ways, in the sense that there is this person, this being, this soul who has a very large part of who they are and what they were, yet there are these gaps, these things missing, and just that confusion and search for those things that are missing and not being able to come up with it, and the frustration that must provide. Like, that was kind of like just a beautiful disaster, and not really knowing how they were going to make their way forward, and wondering, like, what is next for them? Was that really the selfless thing to do? Right. As I thought it would be. I'm playing a video game. Yeah, I'll sacrifice my character to save the world. Like, that's what you're doing. And then, much like everything else in this game, like, was that the right choice? Did I just make things markedly worse for everyone?
Right.
thinking I was doing the right thing.
Exactly. And that's what Nier's been doing this whole game, is thinking that he's doing the right thing. But, killing all the humans, and then at the end, maybe either killing Kaine or at the very least leaving her with an existence where she's going to be troubled by this, missing piece of her that she'll never know what it is.
Yeah.
So that's obviously not great. And the commonality here, which got me thinking about that tedium again, is that this is the product of all of the tedium that you went through, going through the game literally 3 times, doing side quests, not grinding up for weapons yet. That's later, but, or by my playthrough, when I did ending D, I had all the weapons because I needed to start E. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So this was the culmination of all of that tedium, all of these fetch quests, the shuttle runs, the collecting, is either killing Kaine, which sucks, or leaving her with this kind of hollowed out existence, which also sucks.
And in doing so, watching everything that you've grinded for, every weapon you've collected, every word that you've collected for your magic, everything gets systematically deleted from you. Like all those things you did, you watch it go away in your mind forever. And if you were playing the first version of the game, literally forever, that wasn't coming back. And that's a lot, and it makes you question was it worth it? Is the message of this game, was it really worth it? And I think that's a conversation to be had, I think. And it's different for most people. Different. I mean, your experiences may vary. I find it kind of remarkable that you and I had such similar experiences with the game that can evoke so many emotions. And it's clear a lot of people did, right? Because there are Nier enthusiasts. There are people that when Automata was announced, people were like blown away that they were going to make another one of these. It's like to steal a phrase from my podcast partner Leah Haydu, she said that Nier was one of those things that like it was kind of like swept away and didn't get a lot of fanfare. She literally felt like it was something that was made for her. You know what I mean? It was like, this is the thing that was made for me, and it's amazing that these choices leave that type of impression. It shows you how well that story was constructed, and the drip feed of information, how it was staggered in such a way that kept you on that trail to then lead to this, again, a choice with no real positive ending. Right.
Yeah. And so you're left at the end questioning, was it worth it? Because even if you saved Yona, you had to kill one of your companions to get there. So you don't feel great about that. And so this kind of like, and this is reinforced in ending E, but the fact that you did all of these things with the sole purpose of saving Yona, and in one of them, both of them, Yona's saved, but there is no happy ending here. And that was the purpose of all of this repetition, was that constant thought in your head that I'm doing all of this for the happy ending, because there has to be a happy ending. There always is.
Yeah, there always is. Yeah.
Not here. No. And this is a Yoko Taro staple, I feel like, and that's why I feel like this is why the game ends this way, but you had to do so much bullshit to get to it, because that drives it home. And that's why I wanted to revisit the tedium and repetition conversation here, because this is where that point's hammered home.
And that nihilism aspect you brought up before, that like everything is meaningless. Everything you have done really has no meaning and has no consequence other than the consequences to like the things directly around you, the lives directly around you, and how there was no getting out of this without repercussions for somebody, and to kind of live with that and to have your existence quite literally deleted in front of your eyes it's effective. And it was done very well and left me kind of, slack-jawed a bit. And then I'm not trying to progress along necessarily, but then knowing that there was this root E that was added later on. And my question for you as we kind of get into it, and because there's not a million things to talk about, but would be like, is root E a cop-out from the original theme? Because root E, as we'll get into it, does kind of seem to undo some of that. So,
no, I don't think it's a cop out, and I'm happy to talk about it when we get there for sure. Because this is a very clear thing that I was very satisfied with how ending E ended because you got what you want, but it wasn't what you wanted in a way. So,
okay.
So yeah, in Route E, if you've collected all the weapons, which God help you if you did both of these and didn't collect all the weapons, you got to play the whole game again. Route E starts, you know what you know, but you start from the beginning as Kid Nier. And so this is where, you're going out in the field with the children, killing them, knowing what's going on out there. You play the first maybe 4 or 5 hours of the game up until you fight the big shade with Kaine. And then Kaine wakes up. That was a dream for her. She was reliving that. And she's been remembering slowly, I think, that there was a person, that void that she's feeling is a person. Yeah. And also wonders why she was crying at the end of when she, quote, fought the Shadow Lord and rescued Yona, because she didn't do that. So she's wondering why she's crying in that moment. And this is something that I was very happy to see, is that you get to play as Kaine in this section. And it was a breath of fresh air. Even if it's not that different, it's still different enough.
Yep. And it's not a very long section, really. Once you trigger that, it's not, you're maybe 90 minutes from the end, right? maybe 2 hours at the most. But yeah, it's a breath of fresh air. It really is. Like, you're just the kind of the dodge roll being that like cartwheel thing, and the kind of like, like it just, to be able after 35, 40 hours of this game to just be controlling something different was enough. It was enough. It was cool. Really cool.
Yeah. And so now things get into an area of the story that I really don't know what's going on. I was just kind of along for the ride at this point, but you go into the big tree in the Forest of Myth. I guessed that it was like a hub or a server or something for Project Gestalt, because this universe has big things like that. That's kind of what I figured. Do you have any insight on the story portion of this?
I wish I did. I was trying to draw an allegory between the two kind of like children of light you meet down there, and trying to relate them to the twins that you fight in Automata. I don't think they're the same. I've done some reading. I don't believe they're the same. And I was looking for more meaning there than I think it necessarily was presenting me with. But no, it seems like, but you're basically fighting your way through what appears to be some sort of organic computer server type of situation.
Yeah. And you are kind of fighting this impossible enemy, and all seems lost. And then Emil shows up, which was, it would have been a big tease if you played the original Nier, because, again, as far as I understand it, this was not in the original game. And so you just have that teaser of Emil's head rolling around talking to himself, but then no payoff like this. So we do get that payoff. Emil is back.
Yeah, Emil comes back, and you get to the most satisfying part of this ending, except for the ending itself of this playthrough, was that there is a good, let's call it a 10-minute combat sequence where you and Emil just get to absolutely kick ass.
Yeah.
You are just kicking ass, and you're not killing shades, really. You're killing these manifestations of yourself generated by the computer program to try to take you down in this metaphor of being defeated by your own self, all those things that you could draw from those images. But you just get to absolutely destroy it. Feels like, it's just like two pals getting back together to do what they do best, and but guilt free in a pursuit of the truth type of thing. It really was cathartic.
Yeah, I agree. It was a lot of fun. Kaine is really fun to control. And again, it's not that different from Nier, but it is different. And I appreciated that at this point in the game. Kaine makes a comment here that I thought was, kind of setting up what was going to happen, because I didn't know what Route E was going to be like. I didn't know what we were working for until she mentions that she thinks they used to fight with someone else. And I was like, oh, okay, we're going to try to bring him back. Okay.
Yep.
So the next section, I don't know what's going on, really. You're inside of the hacking matrix from Nier Automata, inside the computer system, basically. And you fight some kind of unwinnable bosses. I think the point of this is that Kaine is kind of fighting against her memories, basically, all of her past, bad experiences. And I thought I didn't have a better explanation for how she does it, except through sheer force of anger, she undoes ending D and wills Nier back.
Yeah. It really, there's, this is going to sound really dumb, Dave. I apologize.
Bring it.
But there's this moment in, a side quest in Goat Simulator 3. Now, to believe it's, hold the phone. There's a side quest, Goat Simulator 3, where the quest objective is fix the computers. And your response as the goat is to destroy all the computers.
Yes.
And that's how you complete the quest. Like, I fixed it by destroying everything. And that's what this feels like. Like you said, sheer expression of anger and will, just unleashing her hell on everything around her and to somehow brute force her way into getting what she wants. Yeah, I don't know if there's a good way I can explain it other than it was fun to do, but I don't necessarily can't wrap my head around the why.
Perhaps it's like this computer system is the thing that is making the world the way it is. And if she destroys her way through it, then she can undo things that have been done. That's the best I can come up with, but it's not really important because, you're inside of a computer system. Everything's all weird anyway. It's sci-fi craziness. So who cares? So I'm going to go with my original theory, which is that, again, through sheer force of anger, Kaine undoes the past. And a giant flower erupts from the ground with a reborn Nier there with Kaine and with Emil. And there's a nice quote here, very JRPG, where they say, even though our journey was meaningless, even if we made mistakes, even if the world ends, we journey with the people we cherish. And that is a big takeaway for the game from me. Again, that the character group is so good together. And that was what really matters to them at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think, like I said, and I'm not saying that this is a cop-out. I wanted to talk about it with you, about this ending. And it doesn't necessarily erase what had happened. I'm not sure. They don't really get into it if by Nier, and she talks about this as she's fighting through the computer. She's getting very mad about it, remembering this person, remembering these things. There's we don't really get a sense. It's not like they do 6 months later and they show them all having a picnic together or anything, Right. You don't know what did they just rebuild? Is Nier going to come back with all of his memories? Is Yona going to suddenly now remember Nier because Kaine does? Like, it doesn't get into that, and I don't think it needs to. It just shows this kind of rebirth through a literal blossoming flower. Yeah. That this through remembering the ones that we journey with, through the memories of those that we love, we can kind of rebuild and forge on. Yeah. And that's what I took from it. Now you said you experienced something. How did that ending make you feel about the experience? Yeah.
So initially, I was kind of surprised that you get this happy ending here, that everything seems to work out the way that you wanted, because you some point throughout Route E, you start to realize this is what you're working toward, and then now this is what you want. You want Nier to come back. And the reason I don't think this is a cop-out, the reason I still think it fits with the rest of the themes from this game, I mean, from what Yoko Taro apparently values in storytelling, is that you can keep playing this after the end because it restores your save file, but it restores you back in Route C and D. So you're setting up a cycle of unhappiness and terrible endings. So you did get what you wanted. You got your happy ending, but now what? You're right back where you were, which I do think fits really well into this game.
Yeah, it sets you right back on the path that you've already tread however many times now, and that you can go back in there and you can do those menial side quests again. You can get the achievement. This is one of the biggest reasons I didn't go back and try to get all the achievements for the game. It's not that I wouldn't have enjoyed the process just being in that world and all those things, but to what end? Like, to what end am I doing that? To what am I actually accomplishing by bringing all of these bits of scrap to the junk heap to level up all these weapons, to deliver the mutton pieces to the same lady on the same bench who always needs 10 of them. It just puts you back on this cycle. Like you said, the cycle of unhappiness. I thought it was very well written and it's not untrue. You can go, hey, congratulations. You've restored everything that you lost. But what does that even mean?
Right.
And that's something to consider. And it's I don't think, and this is where I have to give my thanks to you, because I don't know that independently of these conversations that you have with other people and how lucky I am to record these podcasts and to have these thoughts, like bounce these ideas off each other. I'm not sure I come to all this independently. And that's one of the great things about, there's a lot of terrible, bad things about internets and forums and Reddit pages, but there's also a lot of great things like this. Or
Yes.
You read other people's experiences and their thoughts and their feelings about this. And just the fact that this game about nothingness, about meaninglessness, spawns so many critical thoughts, spawns so many emotions from all these people, shows that there is meaning to the nothingness. It's like snake eating. It's this Ouroboros type of situation where, like it's something special.
As you like to say, video games, man.
Yeah, video games, man. They're all right. They are all right.
Yeah. And I extend that to you too. Talking with people on the show and talking with you today has been enlightening for me to get through, unfinished thoughts and, questions that I had and stuff like that too. And the things that I brought to this conversation were things that I've, taken from here and there. People in the Discord server that have been a big help. Especially I want to shout out Weep Lord and Moonborn, staples of the Discord server who had fully formed opinions about the themes of this game when I was playing it for the first time. And so greatly benefit from bouncing ideas off of them. And then to bring that and bounce ideas off of you, this is exactly why I want to do a podcast like this.
Yeah.
So
it's awesome.
hell yeah.
And this is not a plug. It's not my Discord server. I've now been a part of that Discord server for a short amount of time. That is a welcoming and awesome group of people. If you want to be a part of a Discord server where people are supportive, people have interesting ideas, people that just share fun anecdotes and there's nothing about that Discord server that I don't go on. It doesn't bring me joy. I don't post that much on it, but I'm reading everything everybody's posting. It's a really nice group of people that that are enthusiastic about the same things and are supportive of the things that other people are enthusiastic about. So it's been a really nice place to see these ideas kind of take, textual shape.
Good. I'm glad you feel that way. The internet's dark and full of terrors, as we know, but there are lots of really cool spaces within the internet. So when you do find a good place, and I agree. I think that the people that the type of people who want to join a Discord server and come in and talk with me and you and a bunch of other people, we all, generally feel the same way about things. Even if we have different opinions about stuff, we value the same things. That's what I'm trying to say. So yeah, that works out really well. This recording has been everything I hoped it would be. This game had a lot of meat on the bone, and I'm happy with how this went. So Brian, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful to talk about this, and as many times as you'll let me back on to talk about whatever it is. I'm sure we'll find a game that we won't just both gush about at some point. But this has been this. I wouldn't have played this game without this recording. I wouldn't have found the time for it. it would have sat on the backlog, not to reference the show. And now that it's not, now that it's not, it's become something that's something experience I hold very near and dear. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, 100%. So again, everyone listening, thank you for listening. I will say one more time to check out Kane and Rince and Character Issues for various video game conversations. Always good stuff. I got them in my weekly rotation all the time. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Brian, thank you one more time. Tune in next week for the next game to come out of the backlog.